Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku was born with talent and also had the most powerful quirk in the recorded history, Deku X Momo, part 2. So before we start, please go check out the author of this fanfic, CzereLion, link is in the description, also subscribe to our channel and like this video, so let's begin the video. Okay, it's ready everyone, says Cheese. Announced All Might as he set the camera on the table and hurried at nearly sonic speed to take his place behind the boy and his mother. Geez. They all said simultaneously as the flash of the camera blinded them. Today was a very special day. One that deserved to be documented as such. It was Izuku's first ever school day. Both his mom and the number one hero spent a lot of time trying to choose the best possible school for the boy out of the options available to them. It was a school which was not very far, it had many clubs to choose from, a brand new gym, great overall ratings, and if that was not enough, the school was in an area where villain activity was nearly non-existent for 3 years, and counting. Past 2 years were surprisingly uneventful after All Might and the other top heroes stopped the infighting between powerful villains which started after the death of All for One, and now the crime rate was at the all-time low. Heroes had much more time for their own lives, the economy was blossoming, and people felt much safer. All Might soon found himself with a lot of free time and spent most of it either with Izuku and Inko or making commercials. It especially entertained him when he watched Izuku whilst the little boy got excited over cartoons on the TV. The big man even began to transport the boy into the daycare, which caused major unrest in the facility. The little green-haired boy was under constant fire of questions once the hero left. His friends were shocked that he managed to keep this secret from them, but after an endless chain of teary apologies and a promise to get them both autographs, they forgave him. Shoto was flabbergasted by this news and had no idea how to react to it. Just imagine that one day you find out that the friend with whom you have been spending time for a month lives not only with one of the most famous people on the planet, but also your father's rival. Though before Todoroki had any real chance to feel anger, he was presented with an apology and a peace offering in the form of a firecracker popsicle. It wasn't anything unusual for the green-haired boy to bring candy with him when he visited his scarred friend. It took some time, but they perfected the process of sneaking into the house of the number 2 hero. Once every week Izuku and Iida would visit Momo to play, and once there, they would make some sort of distraction, which allowed the shorter of them to pick up Shoto and bring him back with him. It wasn't just an example of perfect planning on Iida's part, but it also allowed Midoriya to train his flight skills. Before, he had a serious problem trying to control even a single flying object, but now he was able to shuffle cards in the air, even if it was still very difficult. The 4 of them quickly became great friends, and the main trio celebrated every birthday together. Tenya soon felt as if he gained 2 younger brothers and a sister, which he needed to protect from any and all dumb ideas. Momo finally gained test subjects for the makeup products she had appropriated from her mother's stash, and Shoto was always so happy to be included in some way no matter what they were doing. For the first time in his life, Izuku knew what it meant to have real friends, which is also why it came as such a shock when he discovered that they wouldn't spend much time together in the future. Like it or not, his friends lived very far apart, and if it wasn't for the special daycare they would have never even met each other. Yet there was something that would always keep them together, something stronger than any villain they could ever meet. They all had the same dream to become heroes. So, when their last day together in the daycare finally came to its end, they all promised to become the best heroes the world has ever seen. Inko felt like crying for what seemed like 8 times today, as she looked at her son who was all nice and dressed up for the first real big step in his life. "Do you have your snacks?" she asked worriedly as she checked him over again. "Yes mom. Let's go," he exclaimed happily as he reached out for her to take her hand, and when he felt her fingers gently wrapped around his tiny ones, he began pulling her to the exit. "So cute," thought Toshinori as he took one last picture before putting down his camera. Izuku was so excited to finally go to school, not just because he would meet new people, but also due to the fact that the number 1 hero gave him a special promise. -8 months ago. Uncle Toshinori, can we start today?" The green-haired boy shouted for the 3rd time this week dressed in his All Might pajamas as he latched onto the big man's leg the moment he left his bedroom. Maybe it was the cute nickname or the determination, which was basically radiating off the boy, but the number 1 hero had a hard time rejecting the boy's advances lately. "No, Izuku, it's too early," he said with a sigh. "But I will try very hard, I want to be as strong as you," Izuku argued enthusiastically. All Might gave the boy a long look contemplating the pros and the cons, but no matter how he looked at it, the boy in front of him was not ready yet. "Tell you what, we will start after you start going to school. How does that sound? Pinky promise?" "Pinky promise." The hero agreed and poked the boy's nose with his pinky. "Present." Inko led her son through the buzzing city slowly, teaching him how to safely cross the road, what he should do if a stranger tries to talk to him, how traffic lights work, and so on. She did everything to ensure that her Izuku not only get safely to his school, but also that he will soon be able to make his way there without her. It didn't take long for her to find his classroom, since there were many other parents here, and soon, she found herself standing in front of their goal hand in hand with her son. "Are you ready?" she asked Izuku as she looked down on him with a warm smile, and he in return gave her a small nod and a brave smile before letting go of her hand and entering the classroom. This was a very interesting day for little Izuku. His teacher, Miss Taka, explained to them how school works, what recess is, and what they would learn. The green-haired boy was excited that he would finally be able to read about his favorite heroes in magazines he always stared at when his mom took him to the store for ice cream. On the first day, their teacher took them all outside the classroom, showed them the entire building, and after they came back from their tour, each one of them was encouraged to introduce themselves in front of the class, and soon, the time for their first recess came. Izuku was happy to get up from the provided tiny chair, since he was not used to sitting for so long. There were many new faces all around him, and once again he had no idea how to start a conversation with his new classmates. Then he noticed two girls sitting just 2 seats behind him, one of them had hair with green rectangular spots, and the other looked rather plain, except for the yellow gemstones replacing her eyes. Both of them looked frustrated and hopeless as they wrestled with something small on their desk. Izuku walked over to see what was wrong, and in a few seconds, he understood that the girls were futilely trying to open 2 yogurts, both of which appeared to be stuck. Once he saw it, Izuku had a brilliant idea on how to solve their problem. "Hi. Want some help?" he asked awkwardly as he raised his hand in greetings. "Can you open it?" the yellow-eyed asked hopefully, gesturing to the cup. "I think so," he said before removing his glove. Izuku focused on his index finger and watched as it elongated and flesh on it transformed into a sharp blade made from bone covered in hard enamel. He swiftly cut a large hole in the top of the cup before setting it back on their desk. His mother sometimes let him help her when she was cutting vegetables after she got over the initial shock which she experienced when she first witnessed his ability. He was just about to reach for the second cup but noticed that both girls took a step back and that their faces adopted a completely terrified expression. When he saw this, Izuku himself felt shocked. This emotion only grew when tears of fear appeared in their eyes. "Wait, it's okay," he tried to say as he outstretched his gloved hand towards the girl with white hair, only to be quickly stopped. "Get away from me, monster," one of the girls shouted as they both ran away from the class, trying to find a teacher, whilst Izuku just stood there frozen, scared, and sad. Soon enough his own eyes filled with tears, and the green-haired boy began sobbing. The whole incident was quickly resolved, and Miss Taka calmly explained to him that sharp objects shouldn't be used in school without supervision. Yet even though he didn't get into any sort of trouble, Izuku's fate was pretty much sealed. Now everyone in class feared him. Whenever he tried talking to someone, they would either ignore him or avoid him like the plague. For all they knew, he could have it underneath his bodysuit. Later that day, when Izuku came home with his mother, he already lost all of his excitement over the promised training. All Might quickly noticed this, and when he discovered what had happened, he tried to cheer the boy up a bit, yet the hero's words didn't help much. Unfortunately for the boy, this situation only got worse. Words traveled quickly, and soon everyone heard about the crying demon of their school. It didn't take long, and Izuku became something akin to an attraction. No one really messed with him, yet he felt as if he was always being watched. An entire week went like this, but luckily he was able to meet with friends during the weekend. This improved his mood a bit, but after he returned to school nothing changed. After a few more days, Izuku sort of accepted that he wouldn't make any more friends in school, and so he stopped trying. Then Thursday came around. The boy was walking home. It was a beautiful afternoon. The birds were singing, and a few rays of warm sunlight forced themselves through the clouds, and so he decided to enjoy the weather for a while longer and chose to walk through a small park, which was relatively close to the penthouse. Today a curious thing happened. His school bag somehow got displaced after the boy left to use the toilet, and he only found it after nearly 30 minutes with the help from the janitor on top of a large file cabinet. "Come on. Show us." Angry words carried by an angry voice suddenly came from the nearby playground. Izuku immediately tensed when he heard that voice. Izuku walked a bit closer to see what was going on. There were 3 boys in total, and he knew only one of them. 2 tall boys were standing around one of his classmates, not allowing him to leave. He remembered the boy. He was sitting in the back corner of the classroom. He was always very quiet and no one paid much attention to him. He had purple hair and eyes that always seemed to be tired, which were right now opened wide in panic, trying to find a way to escape. "I can't use it," Shinso exclaimed, but the boys were undeterred. The bigger one took a step towards the purple-haired boy and threw a punch to his shoulder so strong that the purple-haired boy lost his balance and tripped into a sandpit. "Everyone knows you've got a villain's quirk, so show us." The taller of the two ordered angrily as he made a cloud of steam shoot up in the air out of his palm. "Why can't you just leave me alone?" Shinso thought. Ever since his quirk first manifested in kindergarten, everyone was always afraid to speak to him, since sometimes people would just freeze randomly when he was talking to them and came into their senses only when he ordered them to. Itachi was trying his best to avoid talking to everyone, but he slipped when he asked an upperclassman where to find the light switch. There was that weird twitch, and in an instant all emotion vanished from the girl's face. Once he woke her up, she ran away scared and told her friends. Shinso was pulled out of his thoughts when he heard a familiar voice yelling. "Leave him alone." Izuku shouted as he hurried over to them, which grabbed the attention of everyone. "Pair Ryuji, look at that, it's the other creep," one of the upperclassmen said when the green-haired boy stopped in front of them. "It looks like Kichi. Now we have the demon and the weirdo," said smiling Ryuji with steam still coming out of his palm in short bursts. Izuku just now noticed that the other one had only one eye with two pupils, which was slightly larger than normal, positioned in the center of his forehead. Both of the upperclassmen had to be at least 2 years older and taller by more than a head. The green-haired boy was however not affected by these facts as he pushed through them and blocked them from getting into the sandpit. "Get out of my way," ordered Ryuji angrily, but the boy didn't move. "Don't hurt him or I will stop you." Izuku stuttered and raised his shaking little fists under his chin as a warning, which had little effect. Ichi tried to push the green-haired boy into the sandpit but froze when the solid ground vanished from under his feet and he found himself floating a foot in the air. Once Ryuji saw this, he panicked. "Let him go, you monster," he yelled and sprayed a cloud of boiling hot water straight at Izuku. The green-haired boy tried to dodge the small blast, even though he knew that there was no chance he would be able to move fast enough, but then, something strange happened. "Oh, you monster." The words seemingly repeated themselves as the hot blast flew harmlessly past him and softly dispersed in the air. Ryuji prepared another blast, and when the younger boy noticed, he acted on instinct. Ichi suddenly fell from the air right on top of his best friend, which made them both end up on the ground. After seeing just how easily Izuku dodged their attacks without moving more than a few inches made them very nervous, but fear really set in when they looked at him and saw the soft purple glow in his eyes. Both quickly scrambled to their feet and ran away like scared little rabbits without another word. Shinso watched the green-haired boy as he quickly turned towards him once the bullies were gone. His eyes were still shining ominously as he reached out his hand. Hitachi recoiled a bit, he felt scared after seeing the other in a fight, yet there was something gentle, which shone even brighter out of the demon's face. "Are you okay?" The green-haired boy asked nervously as he took Shinso's hand softly into his own gloved one and carefully pulled him up with surprising strength. "Yeah, I'm fine, how did you do that? I thought your quirk was for cutting things." Hitachi asked, still scared a bit of the other boy. Such feelings quickly vanished though when Izuku's face adopted a small smile. "I'm not sure," admitted Izuku after a few seconds of silence. Once the words left his mouth, Shinso couldn't hold back an amused chuckle. Maybe it was the honesty in the demon's voice or the cluelessness on his face, but the situation immediately lost its seriousness. The two of them quickly became friends after this event. It was clear immediately that Izuku didn't ever judge anyone by their quirk. Soon the two of them spent every recess and every meal together. Bullies never dared to mess with them again, and it didn't take long until Izuku invited Hitachi to hang out with his other 3 friends. Despite his insomniac appearance, Shinso fit right into the group. A few days later Izuku began his training with All Might and it was not an easy task. Tashinori always seemed like a gentle soul, but he was one hell of a trainer. 20 more burpees. The green boy gasped for breath as he was given another order by the number 1 hero. "Do I hear a quitter?" All Might asked playfully as he took a sip from his sports bottle while running at a calm pace on the treadmill. "And no," Izuku answered as he quickly dropped to the floor, did a push-up only to jump back up only a second later. Exercise was just a small part of this training though. Tashinori also asked his mother to prepare him meals that were bigger than normal, which was no hard task since she also didn't want her son to remain skinny forever. But a few weeks into the training, his small body began to feel different, he had more stamina than ever, and his baby noodle arms began to slowly harden, yet he was still banned from using All Might's quirk, which was a bit frustrating. Over time he adapted to this routine, he was faster, stronger, and just a bit more confident, going from his normal "I don't know if I can" attitude into a better "I will try" attitude. To say that Tashinori was proud would be an understatement. Instead of walking, he would run home from school without getting winded or sweaty. It was only Wednesday, and he was running home from school when he saw it. an adorable puff of white and black fur peering at him from an alleyway with big bright blue eyes. He stopped to take a closer look, but the puff immediately turned around and sprinted away on its 4 legs. "Hey, wait up!" Izuku yelled and quickly followed the small animal into the alleyway, but it vanished in seconds and he reached a dead end. The ghost. After looking around for a while he became confused and disappointed, but as he got ready to leave, he heard a growl from behind. There just a few feet away from him was a small puppy that looked quite angry. Its coat was white with a large streak of black across its back. It looked like a husky, but much wider. It was not fat per se, just heavy built. Its shining blue eyes were completely focused on the boy. It couldn't be older than 3 months. The growls were soon accompanied by surprisingly loud barks, which made Izuku take a step back. "What do you want, little guy?" he asked, but the puppy just wouldn't stop barking and showing its baby teeth. "Is this a holdup? Are you hungry, little guy?" Izuku asked as he took off his bag and reached for a mostly empty bento box his mom prepared for him. Even his school lunch portions were increased and he often found himself bringing some of it back home. There were 3 baby sausages left, so he took one and threw it to the small dog, who simply leapt up and caught the piece of meat in the midair, which made the boy smile excitedly. The other 2 sausages soon had the same fate. After filling its belly, the puppy completely lost all of its aggression, quickly wagged its tail in happiness, and Izuku was invited to give the dog a friendly pet. This attempt was happily accepted. After getting its TNC, the dog hurried away, yet the boy somehow knew it wouldn't be the last time he saw this little menace. And lo behold, 2 days later, when Izuku was once again making his way home, the dog appeared yet again, and this time it obediently waited for the boy's approach and led him back into the alleyway. This time Izuku was prepared to pay his tribute, but this time the puppy swiftly crawled under a small trash container, only to emerge again, just 30 seconds later with something gray in its mouth. Izuku felt very nauseous when he understood just what it was. It was a half-eaten medium-sized rat. The boy felt his stomach twist once he saw the thing, and it only worsened once the dog put its prey down and pushed it towards the boy with its nose before sitting down and looking up expectantly. "Oh you didn't have to, really, that's pretty gross," the boy commented nervously once he was faced with this strange offering. Once again out came the bento box with some ham rolls still in it. When the dog understood just how much better they tasted than the mouse, it completely forgot about the dead critter and paid it no mind when the small creature ended up in the trash. This sort of thing repeated a few more times until one day, the dog didn't stay behind. It walked side by side with the green-haired boy straight into the penthouse, and after a bit of pleading from Izuku and a lot of puppy eyes from the little mutt, there was no way that the newly named hero was going to stay outside. "Good job, team," Iida shouted once the last one of the villains hit the floor defeated. It has been 13 hours since the Valor Squad arrived at the train station, which was completely overrun by villains of all shapes and sizes. They still had no chance though once the elite hero agency showed up. There was their captain, a speedster who can dodge every single attack and deliver a crushing counter before the attacker even knew what happened to the Neo-Ingenium Tenya Iida. The amazingly perfect and perfectly amazing support hero is able to provide every possible weapon to any of her teammates and perfectly skilled in their use herself. The hero of creation is the beautiful Creati Momoyarozu. Then there was the absolute powerhouse. The hero is able to stop any villain with a single move of his hand. The scarred spirit of frost, which never gives up. The absolute zero, Shoto Todoroki. The always mysterious master of mischief, who can turn his opponents against one another with just a single order with his power to control minds. The hero who won't rest until his target is under his control is the mind-bender Hitachi Shinso. And lastly there is the secret weapon of the group, the hero, who probably single-handedly keeps the hero memorabilia market in the green numbers. The hero, who can do everything just as his hero name sort of implies, Deku Izuku Midoriya. "Perfect job as always, Hero Squad," said one of the officers as he shook the hand of every member. "Let's go for a pizza," Izuku happily suggested. His suit torn to shreds from the furious battle exposing his hard musculature. "Lunch was 2 hours ago. It's not healthy to eat so soon. You will just end up as a fat slob." Iida reacted like a concerned mother, making the entire group laugh. Then he felt it, a cold touch on his neck. Izuku's throat wouldn't move. He wanted to ask for their help, but he couldn't move. He reached for his neck and couldn't find any source of the cold, but it was quickly spreading down to his collarbone. He saw his team talking, yet he was unable to hear what they were saying. He felt like screaming, but his voice wouldn't leave his lips even when the cold feeling spread to his belly. Izuku tried to wave his hands, kick and run, just to get rid of that feeling, but they were as heavy as lead. Suddenly he woke up. He was in his room surrounded from all sides by countless hero posters. Over the last 2 years, his room went through some serious changes. Walls, which were previously occupied only by All Might, now housed posters and figures of many different heroes. It was a change, which Toshinori greatly appreciated, even though the life-size paper replica of himself in the corner still creeped him out a bit, and he more than once proposed that they should use it as an impromptu obstacle when Izuku was learning to ride a bicycle, since all such obstacles quickly ended as trash, but it made the boy happy, and so he chose to tolerate the fomite. Izuku quickly looked around, trying to find the reason why his dream was ruined, and soon he realized that his blanket was gone, and it didn't take him long to notice that his precious hero held it in his mouth with a pleased smug look on his face. In these 2 years which they have spent together, the mud has grown at least 4 times its original size, and now it is heavier than Izuku. When they took Hiro to the vet to get him every vaccine he needed, the doctor told them that from the looks of it, Hiro was some kind of a special mix of at least 3 different breeds. He had the fur and color of a Siberian husky and the body type of the Alaska Malamute, but his size was still way too massive for either of those breeds. The vet even told them on one of their visits that at first it looked like someone had taken a very fuzzy wolf and painted him black and white. Yet neither the dog's large paws nor teeth were enough for the family to see him as anything else than a big warm fuzzy marshmallow. He accepted his role as the boy's bodyguard very quickly, sleeping and eating with Izuku as well as following him around wherever he went. It also became very clear that Hiro was extremely smart. For example, he would do any trick you wanted, but only if you had a treat in your hand, because if not he would play dead for up to half an hour until you left him alone. But he could also be energetic, just like right now. "Why do you have to do this whenever I'm having a nice dream?" the boy asked and threw his pillow at the fuzzy giant, who was still holding his blanket just out of his reach, and the dog's smile only got wider. It was time for their morning run. The husky blood in Hiro's body was boiling, and he absolutely loved going for a run around the neighborhood. They would go 3 times a day. Right after Izuku woke up and had breakfast, when he came home from school, and right before dinner. Toshinori was very supportive, since he knew that boy of Izuku's age would not put on any serious musculature until his puberty started, but if he improved his stamina, it would be much easier once he was ready for it, and his mom was okay with it, as long as he brought his phone with him. It was a nice calm morning, and some of the brighter stars were still visible in the sky next to the rising sun. It must have rained the night before, because the grass was covered with silver little droplets of water, which moistened Izuku's shoes and Hiro's paws as they ran at full speed. They must have already reached their 5-kilometer mark, because the boy was having trouble catching his breath. There were already people on the streets, some of them commuting to work, some of them shopping, and then there were few jogging just like the boy. Izuku gave in to his fatigue and stopped for a few seconds to calm his lungs and heart. That's when someone gently touched his shoulder. This surprised the boy so much, he swiftly turned around and shrugged his hand in the process. When Hiro saw this reaction, he gave the stranger a threatening growl. Izuku didn't recognize the boy, but from his height, he judged that he had to be at least a year older than him. The boy had medium-sized messy indigo hair which nearly covered his most prominent feature. His ears reminded the younger boy of a movie he saw with All Might and his mom a few weeks ago about some fantasy world with blonde tall people called elves running through the trees. The stranger looked both scared and nervous at the same time, but he stood still on his wobbly legs before looking at his feet and muttering something under his breath. "Can you help me?" Unbeknownst to either of the 2 runners, this boy was moping around the street and trying to find enough courage to talk to an adult for nearly 10 minutes already, but his unbelievable shyness and critically low self-esteem prevented him from speaking to anyone. He felt like such a failure, but then he saw this boy and summoned just enough courage to talk to him. "What do you need?" Izuku asked quickly when he saw the panicked expression on the other's face, which apparently surprised the boy with purple hair a lot as he snapped his head back up to face both of them yet again. My friend, I'll show you," the boy with elven ears said, and then bolted into a nearby alleyway. Now it was Izuku's turn to feel surprised, but after a quick look at his dog, they both hurried after him. It didn't take long for them to catch up to him. He was standing next to a pile of clothes on the ground and breathing heavily. Izuku was about to ask what was wrong, but the boy was swiftly interrupted by a cheerful voice. "Hey, is anyone out there?" "Tamaki?" the energetic voice asked, scaring the younger boy, who quickly looked around trying to find its source without any success, but the other boy quickly dropped down on all fours next to a storm drain manhole. "It's okay, Mirio, I brought some help," the shy boy answered, trying to calm his friend. "Whoever you are, run away before you end up in here too. We don't have time for your jokes, Mirio, we will be late for school," answered Tamaki angrily. There was a giggle from the storm drain. Izuku was dumbfounded by seeing someone make such a bad joke when they are in such a bad situation. "Are you okay?" The green-haired boy asked in panic as he too got closer to the manhole cover. "Oh, I'm just dandy, a bit wet, but I'll manage. Could you maybe get that cover off so I can get out?" The voice requested, hopefully without a hint of sarcasm. "Sure. Just stay back." Izuku took a step back before he outstretched his arm and slowly began to rise it toward the sky, while concentrating completely at the heavy piece of metal that began peacefully ascending. He nearly lost his concentration when he saw the guy's nude body emerge from the hole. Tamaki blushed a bit before quickly turning away from his blonde friend and facing a wall. Mirio said with a clearly embarrassed tone. "Oh yeah, right, sorry Tamaki." Mirio quickly apologized as he pulled a pair of boxers from the pile and put them back on. "You don't need to be so weird about it though. We are all dudes here after all." He added with a relaxed smile on his face. Right after that, his gaze shifted to Izuku, who carefully set the cover back into place with his power. "Hi, you must be the one who saved me," Tagada said happily and took a few steps to shake the boy's hand, only to be stopped by a very angry-looking dog. Hiro was blocking Tagada's path with his fangs on full display and loudly growling. "Hiro, stop it," Izuku ordered, but the mutt didn't back down one bit. There wasn't a hint of fear on the blonde boy's face or in his weird eyes. Mirio only got on the eye level with the almost wolf and extended his hand slowly to him. "Well, aren't you just the cutest doggo?" Tagada praised, then petted the creature's head and gave it a quick scratch. With that, Hiro turned back into a marshmallow and allowed the stranger to proceed to his master. "Well anyway, my name's Mirio Tagada and that bag of nerves over there is Tamaki." "Hey." The boy with elfish ears protested. "Izuku Midoriya," the boy said with a smile as he accepted Tagada's hand and gave it a shake. Then a thought crossed his mind. The manhole was covered when he came here. "How did you get stuck in there anyway?" he asked and took a confused look at the hole in the ground. "Well you see. -15 minutes ago." "Hey Tamaki, watch this," Mirio said excitedly as his hand passed through his textbook. He has been practicing this for more than a week now, but seeing the look of amazement on his friend's face was always worth it. "Isn't that totally awesome?" "You're so cool, Mirio." His friend praised him before his smile fell when a random gust of wind carried away Tagada's shirt. Apparently Mirio used his quirk on his entire torso and the poor piece of clothing had nothing to hold onto. "Hey!" Mirio shouted and both him and Tamaki ran after the escaping garment. They both watched as the shirt flapped around in the wind wildly and quickly gave chase. "Whew, that was close. I mean, what are the chances, right?" said Tagada once he snatched the fleeing shirt out of the air just as it was about to land in an open dumpster in an alleyway. He hastily began to put it back on while his friend patiently waited. "Hurry up Mirio, someone might come here but he was interrupted when he heard the worst noise you can possibly hear when you are around the blonde boy. A sneeze. The scientists around the world called this the Ica effect or involuntary quirk activation effect. It was something discovered by a renowned quirk specialist in the US by the name Michael Wagner. Basically, certain quirks had the potential to be activated by reflex actions such as yawning, choking or in Mirio's case sneezing. However, this time there was no sound of Tagada's bare feet hitting the ground or a gasp of someone witnessing this. This time there was only a loud splash and when Tamaki turned around, he found only a pile of clothes next to a manhole. He quickly put two and two together and after he checked if his friend was okay, he ran away in an attempt to find some help because he knew that there was no way he would be able to free his friend by himself. "Right now. Pretty unlucky, right?" Mirio said as he finished his story, which he told while dressing himself. Tamaki was meanwhile getting nervous and kept glancing at his watch and when his now fully clothed friend noticed this, he took one look on his phone and his eyes widened in horror. "Oh crap, we have to hurry. Sorry little guy, I know I owe you one and I hate to cut this short but we need to go." Tagada exclaimed in panic and after he grabbed his friend's arm, he ran as fast as his legs carried him dragging Tamaki behind him. Izuku was a bit confused by them, but it also reminded him that he should probably head home before his mother got scared and so both he and his dog also hurried back to the penthouse. He didn't realize it then, but this small incident lit a small spark within his very soul. A spark which would slowly grow into an enormous flame. Both his mom and the #1 hero were very proud of him when he told them about what had transpired. They had no reason not to trust the boy since neither of them could even remember the last time the boy told a lie and so they celebrated this event with a pizza for dinner and that night Izuku went to bed with an unhealthy full stomach and an exciting story for his friends. A few days later. "Smash!" All Might said firmly as he threw a weak punch into the large sandbag making it shake. "Smash!" Izuku yelled and copied Toshinori's action as best as he could. No. First you need to use your leg." The big man demonstrated by taking a heavy step forward. Then transfer that power through your hip. He twisted his hip with a step. And finally send that power to your fist or your shoulder. The hero finished as he slowly drove his fist into the bag. Izuku nodded and tried again. Put hip, shoulder, fist. The boy said to remind himself as he threw the newly improved punch. He could already feel the positive difference in strength. Great. Now let's try. But before the hero could finish his sentence there was a huge crash, which was followed by a low rumble. The room shook a little, and lights flickered. All might first assume that it was an earthquake, but then the sirens in the streets came on. Attention. Calling all nearby heroes and emergency services. This is not a practice. Izuku heard this once before when his school was doing a fire drill, but it was mostly fun since all of them got a chance to use a real gas mask, and one of the firemen teaching them even filled some parts of the building with harmless white smoke. This however was completely different. There were no laughing and yelling children, happy that their lessons had ended earlier. It was as if the entire world came to a stop. All Might hurried out of the small exercise area followed closely by the boy, and when he entered the living room, he quickly noticed that the television Inko was watching just a moment ago was now showing only emergency broadcasts. This is something big and bad. Yoshinori didn't need to think about it for too long, all he had to do was to look out the window. There, just 6 blocks away, a giant wall of fire and flame was slowly growing from the ground and challenging the night sky. Oh my god, Inko gasped when she saw the immense destruction so close and slowly getting closer. Once All Might noticed this look of fear on her face, he gave her an encouraging smile before gently putting his hand on her shoulder. Hey, don't worry, I will take care of it. He announced confidently before he opened the large window and leapt through it towards the chaos and destruction before him. Inko watched him until his form disappeared in the grey smoke, but now her face was also adorned by a soft smile. Yeah, everything will be fine. She thought to herself before she pulled up a chair next to the window and watched the flames dance for a while. -2 days later. We still have no evidence which would suggest whether the gas explosion was caused by an accident or intentionally. The damage costs caused by the fire exceeded 600 million yen by some estimates, but luckily, thanks to heroes who showed up at the scene, almost all people were quickly evacuated, some of which suffered minor injuries and problems caused by smoke inhalation. In other news, the University of Tokyo hospital was ransacked by a gang of. The voice of the reporter stopped when the TV suddenly shut down, making its old watcher sigh. That was very rude, those simpletons could at least let me finish watching, what the man said with frustration in his voice as he got up from his small, ugly yet surprisingly comfortable sofa. He walked past a small table with a mountain of papers on it. They were mostly just unpaid bills and angry letters. The man didn't pay the heap any mind and instead walked straight into the kitchen where he grabbed his thermos and his wallet with only a few of wrinkled bills still inside. He left the apartment just a few minutes later after he checked his silver mustache in the mirror and headed for a place which he has been observing for 3 days already. It was a small jewelry store on a street that had a small football field opposing it, which meant that there was a great opportunity for a quick getaway if he used his quirk to his full advantage. It was also the end of the month, which pretty much meant that the cash register would be full. The plan was simple. Go in there, take the money, and maybe some jewelry, get out, and run away across the grassy field before turning it into a giant trampoline, which would guarantee that no one would be able to follow him. Hardly a spectacular start to his criminal career, but everyone has to start somewhere, right? Banjiro watched as customers left the store one by one. There was actually a reason why he chose this shop. A few years back he visited this very establishment himself wanting to buy a ring to improve his appearance, but the store's prices were so ludicrous he had to rethink his decision. However, just a few days later he found the same products being offered at third the price in a large mall. Therefore, he saw the shop owner as a cheating scoundrel in need of some financial punishment. He took a seat on a nearby bench, opened his thermos, but stopped just as he was about to pour himself a cup of Earl Grey. Suddenly an image flashed in his head. He remembered one very enjoyable chapter of a book which he had recently read. The chapter depicted fictional villains in the vaudevillian era and their often bizarre theatrics. At that moment Danjiro felt an abrupt surge of inspiration, stood up, and began to pour his tea from incredible height into the cup in his hand. Blast. Gotta work on that. His mad grin swiftly disappeared once the scalding tea mixture made contact with a rather sensitive part of his wrist. He brought his hand up to inspect the damage, but luckily neither his skin nor the fairly expensive black coat he used most of his last money on were relatively unscathed. He was never really good at managing money. If the angry note from his landlord currently hanging on his door was any proof, yet it wasn't all his fault. Just 3 weeks ago he landed a job as a cleaner at the newly created branch of some company that produced chemicals. only for the entire thing to blow up and the company to declare bankruptcy just a few days ago, which left him and many others without a paycheck. Hibita took one last look at the store, and his smile returned once he saw that there was only one customer left. And so, the white-haired man took a sip of his drink, fastened his thermos, and headed towards his target. Bam. Next thing he knew, there were some distorted voices talking somewhere nearby to him, and they all had one thing in common: panic. He then felt a hand on his neck. "He's dead," Shinso announced calmly as he looked at Iida. "Stop joking, Hitachi. You will give Tenya a heart attack," Momo warned as she looked at her bespectacled friend, who was watching the scene in horror and whispering something to himself about going to jail. Izuku was meanwhile trying to remember what he was supposed to do when you find an injured person, and Shoto was wordlessly creating a makeshift ice pack from his own ice and a handkerchief. Danjiro opened his eyes and blinked a few times trying to get the fuzziness out of them. Very soon his vision slowly gained focus and he saw about 10 people around. That number then shifted to 5 in a few seconds, with the figures gradually merging. "Sir, are you okay?" asked Tenya when he saw the tall man sit up. The boy was feeling extremely guilty. They were playing soccer on a nearby field with Shinso as the referee. They were lucky today since Endeavor had to make a last-minute appearance at some court hearing as a witness, so Shoto had the entire day for himself. The teams were him and Izuku against Momo and Tenya. It was a tight battle with a score of 3-3. Seriously, who knew that the black-haired girl would be this good at defending the goal net? Well, either way, the things were getting more and more heated until suddenly the bespectacled boy stole the ball from Todoroki and ran with it towards Izuku, who was doing his best as the goalie. Just as he got close to the shorter defender, he made a feint, which worked like a charm, and Iida watched a green-haired boy leap forward to catch the ball, only to be sidestepped. When Tenya saw the free net in front of him and heard Yaoi Rozu shout in support, he felt the energy surge through his body and he accidentally activated his engine. When he kicked the ball at maximum speed and power, it didn't just stop in the net, instead it broke straight through and continued into a nearby street. They went to search for it only to find it resting next to an elderly man's limp body. The man in question didn't answer, he just looked at each of them with confusion. Tabita's ears were ringing and every noise sounded like he was underwater. Izuku called an ambulance. "I think he has a concussion," Momo said before she started waving her hand in front of Danjiro's face. "Yeah, you're right." The boy pulled out his phone only to adopt a look of dismay. "Oh no. My battery's done," he announced in panic. "That's because you have to download every All Might app even though you have the real one at home," Shinso said with frustration in his voice as he also took out his phone. "Hey. It's not my fault, you know that villain smash is a thing of beauty," Izuku argued just as Shoto put the ice pack on Tabita's forehead. "In my head, what happened?" the mustached man asked as he carefully touched his temple. Everything was still a bit fuzzy, but it was slowly getting better. "What is going on here?" asked a new voice, and the group looked in its direction only to find a petite older man with gray spots in his hair. It's my fault, sir. I kicked the ball too hard and it hit him," Iida said while avoiding eye contact with the person. The old man just smiled a bit before giving the boy with glasses a pat on the head and walking over to the disoriented man. The stranger gently tilted Tabita's head upwards. "Okay lad, just follow my finger with your eyes," he said as he slowly moved his hand through the air and after a while let out a relieved sigh. "He's okay, it ain't even a concussion, he just got popped a bit. Let's get you up, mate," the old man said as he pulled the taller man to his feet. "Shouldn't I call the ambulance?" "It was a hard hit," Shinso asked with the phone still in his hand, but the stranger just smiled. "Don't you worry, sonny. I was a boxer for a few years after high school and I know when someone's just a bit punch drunk," he said before throwing a few sharp jabs into the air for demonstration. Danjiro was still a bit confused, but after a few seconds with the ice pack the fuzziness completely disappeared and was replaced by complete clarity. "He's right, I already feel fine. Though be a bit more careful with your entertainment, lad," Tabita said as he shook a glance at his previous target only to find that the store was still open with only the owner still inside. "Yes sir," Iida said energetically, but his words were nearly unregistered as the man stumbled towards the street. "Don't worry, I will keep an eye on him, the lot of you should probably head home before your parents start to get worried," the old man told the children when he saw their worried looks before he followed the mustached man leaving the scene. Tabita repeated his plan a few times in his head as he approached the store. "Get in, get the money, get out, field, trampoline. Get in, get the money, get out, field, trampoline. Get in, get the money, get out," but his thoughts were interrupted by the old man's voice. "Oh, are you planning on buying something from Alkayashi's shop? He will be happy to hear that, since those bootlegs of his work appeared, he's been struggling." "Yeah, I just thought, wait a second, bootlegs. Yep, some bootleggers started copying and selling cheap knockoffs of his work a few years back. The poor guy almost had to close his business. A sudden wave of guilt gripped Danjuro's heart. This was not a justified crime in any way, shape or form, and besides, robbing a victim of a crime would never bring him fame, only infamy. Well, it's quite late, maybe I will wait till tomorrow before I visit this fine establishment. Could you perhaps point me towards the closest station? It was an improvisation, but he wanted to get rid of this old man without offending him too much. Oh, that's just around the corner that way, want me to show you? The stranger asked after pointing towards the end of the street. No, that will be okay, thank you. Tabita said, and gave the man a small elegant bow before turning around and walking away. The old guy was a bit surprised by the dramatic gesture, but wrote it off as being a result of that small head injury. After he gained some distance and made sure that he was not being followed, Danjuro relaxed a bit. Well, back to the drawing board, he thought. The soon-to-be villain spent a few days on this plan, and it was hard to let it go just like that, but there was no way he would be able to go through with it now. His consciousness was screaming at him. Then he heard those gunshots. A few days later. Hey Izuku, the purple-haired boy began. Hi, what's up Shinso? Midoriya asked with a smile when he saw his friend's weird look. Look at this. Doesn't this remind you of someone? Shinso said as he passed his phone to Izuku. There was an arrow icon, which indicated a video, and so the boy hit play. The shaky footage showed someone running after a large man with quick heavy breaths. Stop, you rascal. The man holding the camera yelled. Suddenly the footage shifted and turned into darkness as the phone was put into a pocket. There were a few gunshots and weird noises before a scream came. The footage shifted yet again, and this time it showed the big man on the ground, presumably unconscious in a backstreet. I got you. The camera was turned around until it showed a familiar mustached face with a toothy smile. Then there was the weird sound again somewhere off screen, and the man made eye contact with the camera. Worry not viewers, this scoundrel will give no more trouble, for I have captured him. And who am I? I am a man inspired by the legendary noble vigilantes of the past, not unlike the heroic outlaw Robin Hood himself. Neither a villain nor a hero. You may call me gentle criminal, and I bid you adieu. The man finished his cheerful and energetic introduction, and after a short pause, where he was likely trying to find out how to turn off the camera, the recording ended. Isn't that? Yeah, it's the guy Ida knocked out. Meanwhile, Gentle was sitting at home, enjoying a cup of green tea and watching as his video slowly went more and more viral. It was even deleted a few times, since vigilantism was illegal, but there was always someone who would re-upload it on YapTube. Who would have guessed that there was someone planning to do the exact same thing on the exact same day as him? Luckily the elderly owner wasn't hurt during the robbery, and Tabita managed to trap the criminal under a few layers of elasticized air after knocking him out. The criminal's gun had little effect on his air shield. He even scored a bit of cash out of the villain's take, which he promptly used to pay off most of his debts and paid rent. He felt bad about taking some of the money, but tea leaves sadly don't grow on trees. But that gentle criminal relaxed a bit and watched as both his celebrity career and a brand new nightmare for police precincts began. 1 month later. Alright, you can do this. All Might said to himself for what felt like the 100th time this day. He has been postponing this for a month now. It's surprisingly easy to find a reason for not doing something. 2 weeks ago, he was forced to chicken out because a black cat crossed his road when he was out on patrol. Toshinori was never superstitious, however if there was even a small chance that this wouldn't go just as planned, he would not take it. But today was simply perfect. The sun was slowly beginning to hide behind the horizon, and its dying rays were setting the sky on fire with a beautiful shade of orange. His score today was 7 villains and 7 criminals, a lucky number for him. Both were good signs, yet he still felt nervous. Then an idea struck him out of nowhere. With that he quickly got rid of his civilian clothes and put on his new hero costume, which just came from development. Even though it felt weird to wear a costume without a cape, he had no problem seeing the practicality of it. Just a few months back his cape got stuck in the door to an elevator, which led to a rather embarrassing situation, and Toshinori knew that it was time for a change. This new uniform made from mostly blue fabric gave him the bonus confidence, which he so desperately needed. And so after taking a calming breath, he opened the door of his room and headed for the living room. Inko was a bit surprised to see him in his hero suit at home, since she knew that he usually got rid of it as soon as he returned from work. Is that the new costume? Oh my, is there an emergency? She asked as she closed the book she was reading just a minute ago and set it down on the coffee table before standing up from an armchair. Her confusion only deepened when Toshinori, instead of heading for the balcony window like he usually did, stopped in front of her. Well, you could say that All Might softly responded as he slowly took the knee. If the green-haired woman's expression was anything to go by, she wasn't expecting this at all. Neither was she expecting him to pull out a white card out of his shoe and begin reading it. Inko, ever since I first met you, you and Izuku have been a blessing for me. I never truly felt the things I feel now whenever you two are around me, and now it's not something I can even imagine living without. There are times when I feel that I don't deserve any of this, but one thing I know for sure is that I love you both unconditionally and totally. Which is why I am here right now with the need to ask you this one seemingly simple question. He spoke slowly with a soft voice which seemed almost unnatural for someone of his massive stature. Inko covered her mouth with both of her hands, and small silvery tears of happiness slowly filled her eyes when she saw the giant man drop the card on the floor and reach into his pocket only to bring out a small dark red velvet box a second later. Inko Midoriya, will you marry me and become my hero for life? When those few words left his mouth, Toshinori opened the box revealing a simple golden ring. In all of his years of being a pro hero which were filled with suspense, danger, and fear, there were several moments during which the number one hero felt as if the time slowed to a crawl, yet this one moment, where there was no danger around to be found, somehow felt even longer than all of them combined. Inko was overwhelmed by emotions, but she also somehow managed to stay calm enough to shakily lower one of her hands and give the blonde man an answer that would surely influence the rest of both their lives. Yes. Of course, I will. All Might's wedding surprisingly wasn't a big televised event as some might have expected. In fact, it was a very small private ceremony with only a few friends present as witnesses. Yet somehow, mysteriously, a few photos of All Might in his black classy tuxedo found themselves on the internet, which led to a wave of classy All Might memes. Some of the popular captions included, "My name is Might, All Might. And when mom gives you your grape juice in a wine glass." For Inko, it was probably one of the best days in her life, second only to the day when her son was born. That day, she even received a very special gift in the form of a wedding dress, which was handcrafted by All Might's former sidekick David Shield, who made absolutely sure that it would not only be nigh indestructible, but also elegant and beautiful. Luckily, the whole thing went without a hitch, and to top it off, the cooks prepared an absolutely perfect feast for everyone. Toshinori had a chance to mingle with some of Inko's friends from work, and she and Izuku both had a chance to meet some of the most famous heroes Japan had to offer. After the wedding, Izuku had a difficult time calling Toshinori dad or stepdad, since he never really got used to using that word, and so he settled for All Might, which the hero had no problem with. All Might saw the wedding as the best moment of his life. He finally officially had a loving family of his own, a beautiful wife, and a bright young boy who was becoming braver and braver with each passing day. The significance of that event was however dwarfed just 2 months later when he found out that Inko was pregnant. Let me just say, soon-to-be fathers can get a little crazy and that it's completely normal, but even considering that, Toshinori went a bit overboard. For one, he forbade Inko from lifting anything heavier than 4 pounds and even employed Izuku to keep an eye on her. During the event only known as the Great Sandpaper Incident, he smoothed every potentially dangerous sharp edge in the penthouse and then ordered a cleaning service to clean up every single particle of sawdust he created in the process. He bought and installed 3 safety gates when Inko was in her second trimester, as if afraid that the baby would just suddenly jump out of her and head for the balcony. This action annoyed Hiro so much he nearly bit the hero when the big man tried to install a 4th one in the hallway leading to Izuku's room. The amount of diapers and toys he bought in advance led some people to believe that he already had at least 5 secret children all over Japan and nearly earned him a record of money spent on baby products. But by far, the funniest was his effort to educate himself on anything and everything he could about child raising and baby diseases, after which he reached to believe that the baby would come out with a very rare and horrific organ deformity that only appeared twice in Japan's history, after he noticed that his wife's hands were a bit sweaty after she came home from an aerobic session. At this point, his books were confiscated and then burned by Gran Torino when he came for a visit and found his former student on a phone trying to find a doctor willing to perform an examination for this exact type of a disease. Yet, when the big day finally came, he was somehow still extremely unprepared. "I am here to serve justice," the number one hero announced as he kicked down the door to an old warehouse. There were more than 8 villains present, and each one of them was clearly terrified at the sight of the giant man. "The building is surrounded by police officers, this is over. Surrender," All Might said with a brave smile as he took a step inside. A dense silence filled the building, and its occupants quickly armed themselves, trying to prepare for a fight that would soon follow, but they were quickly interrupted by an unexpected noise. "A phone call is here. A phone call is here," Toshinori's voice suddenly proclaimed, and the hero swiftly reached into his pocket to pull out a cell phone. "Hello, oh hi Izuku, what? Hey, don't ignore me," one of the villains with appearance similar to a gorilla yelled and jumped forward to deliver a massive blow into the hero's midsection. Normally his punch was strong enough to rip through concrete with ease, but All Might didn't even flinch, he just directed a single finger to his lips in a shush gesture. After seeing this take place, the other villains stared at the number one hero in horror, and none of them dared to make a move to attack or escape. The towering man was however completely focused on the phone call, at times even nodding to what was said to him. "Oh okay, I will be there as soon as possible," he promised after a few minutes, and ended the call. He carefully put his phone away and turned to the people in the warehouse. "Listen up, my wife is giving birth and I don't have time for this. So, I will give you a choice." He paused for a second to make sure that everyone was paying attention. "You can either drop any and all weapons you have and walk outside, where you will be arrested by the police, or you can attack me right now and see what happens when I don't pull any of my punches. You have 10 seconds to decide, use them wisely." All Might said with an intimidating voice that brought fear to their very hearts and left them with a single thought. How did he get so terrifying? That day Toshinori set the new record for most peaceful villain arrests performed in one day and spent the rest of the day pacing nervously in front of the maternity ward. After many long hours of waiting and thinking about the worst possible things that could happen, the giant man was approached by a doctor dressed in a green surgical gown. "Mr. Yagi. How's Inko? Is the baby okay?" All Might quickly asked, trying his best to not enter full panic mode. The much smaller woman let out a squeak after being startled like that, but quickly composed herself when she saw just how scared the man known for his bravery and kindness looked. "They are both fine. You have a healthy daughter," she said with a small kind smile on her face. After more than 10 years of this job, she has seen every possible reaction to both bad and good news, but All Might still somehow managed to surprise her. Toshinori stood there frozen in place. After learning so much about diseases and complications associated with childbirth, it never once occurred to him that there was even a possibility that everything could turn out perfectly fine. His face soon adopted a big dumb manic smile from ear to ear. "Oh my goodness, yes. Yes. Thank you so much," he yelled as he grabbed the small woman by her shoulders and gave her a hug which lifted the doctor off the ground like a rag doll. "Mr. Yagi. This is a hospital," she whispered angrily. "So sorry. Can I see her?" The doctor sighed and led the hero to his wife's room. When he entered the door, the beautiful scene he saw there was forever engraved into his very soul. He saw Inko there, tired, her hair wet and sweaty, holding a small pink bundle in her arms, smiling at it with affection. With a smile he carefully and breathlessly approached her bed to get a closer look at their little creation. When he first laid his eyes on the small defenseless being that was his daughter, his head had great trouble trying to distinguish the emotions he felt, and the only word that appeared in his mind soon left his lips as a few tears of happiness escaped his eyes in this moment of absolute joy. "Perfect. She's just so perfect," he uttered softly, trying to avoid startling the little girl whose beautiful emerald eyes seemed so focused on him. He then focused his soft gaze back to the mother of his 2 children and tried to put into words just how grateful he was for her to be part of his life. And like that, Mayumi was brought into this world. At that time, she weighed only a little over 3 kilograms and measured no more than 51 centimeters. The few hairs on her otherwise smooth head quickly multiplied, and before she was 4 months old, her golden blonde locks needed a haircut. Once Hiro was allowed to smell the baby, the almost husky immediately felt affection for the little princess. He could be sometimes seen under her cradle ready to protect the baby against anyone even a bit suspicious. But if there was anyone who truly fell in love with Mayumi, it was her brother. He always made time to play with her and to keep her company whenever their parents weren't home. He even showed her pictures to anyone who was willing to look at them. Ever since Izuku's last year in elementary school, his puberty began, and with his extreme workout routine and healthy yet protein-oriented diet, his body slowly began to gain weight, which was quickly converted into muscle mass. At just 12 years of age, he was already almost as tall as his mother. Though both Tenya and Momo had a few inches on him, he was slowly gaining on them. His strength also quickly increased, which is something All Might noticed, yet it was still unbelievable that the weak little boy, who started unable to do a single push-up, was now able to do 10 pull-ups with one hand. He was obviously very proud of him, but there was a deep worry hidden under that pride. Was the boy really suited to become his successor? Questions like this one plagued his mind daily. There was no problem with Izuku's determination, not after the grueling training he went through every day, nor was there a problem with bravery. The kid basically taught himself how to fly, and there are not many things braver than to conquer the unknown by yourself. No, there was something much worse. The boy's nature. All Might soon noticed that Izuku was just too gentle for his own good, which was a massive red flag for the #1 hero. Heroes and police officers die quite often during their service, and mostly it's people who are just like his son. Cops who hesitate with their finger on the trigger when they see a crazed gunman, heroes who risk their life trying to save just that one last person from a raging inferno. Gentle idealists who bite way too much to chew whilst trying to do good in the world. Toshinori knew that there was only one way to protect Izuku from the same thing. Training. But first he would need to do one thing. It was a cold late autumn afternoon. The sun was already beginning to set and both the number one hero and Izuku found themselves standing in front of a large cemetery. "What did you want to show me, All Might?" Izuku asked as they began walking through the big area covered by flowers and gravestones both new and old. All Might was acting very strange today, he even wore his yellow striped business suit, which was saved only for special occasions, and had an entire bouquet of flowers with him. "There is someone I want you to meet," Izuku Toshinori said calmly when they passed through a large gate. This area looked much more well kept than the rest of the cemetery, there were flowers and lit candles everywhere. Izuku stopped once he noticed a photo, proudly displayed on one of the resting sites. "Is that Vulcanus?" he asked as he recognized the thin man's old smiling face in the picture. He remembered the hero from an old documentary. He looked at the next grave, and sure enough there was another hero he could still faintly remember. "Yes, there are many great heroes resting here. The number of heroes announced, and gestured towards the rows and rows of small stone monuments. They walked calmly in silence with the boy eyeing every photo and trying to recognize more famous heroes. It didn't take long for them to find what Toshinori was looking for. It was a small grave just on the edge of the cemetery, littered by a few dried up leaves from a nearby maple tree, which the big man gently brushed away and placed the flowers into a nearby vase. Izuku didn't recognize the woman depicted in the picture next to the grave, and her name didn't ring any bells either. But before he had a chance to ask, All Might spoke. "This is the person who taught me everything about being a hero. All Might's teacher." The boy said more to himself as he stared at the gravestone with a newfound respect. Indeed, she was a great hero. Toshinori sighed sadly as his mind served him a fresh serving of nostalgia. Somewhere deep inside he missed all those ass whoopings he received during his training, but much more so the kind words of his teacher. Even when he was bloody with cracked bones and exhausted to a point where he felt as if he was going to die, Nana was always there to motivate him with her kind words, and in the end she even gave her own life just to give him a fighting chance. The number one hero saw her as one of the bravest people that ever lived. "I am sorry," Izuku blurted out without a thought, leaving All Might a bit confused. "What's wrong?" the hero asked as he reassuringly put his hand on Izuku's shoulder. "It's just sad that she's gone, I would have loved to meet her." Toshinori gave the boy a gentle pat on his back before stepping away. "It's okay, but that's exactly why we are here today." "How, what do you mean, All Might?" The number one hero slowly motioned with his hands towards the rest of the cemetery. "Take a look around, there are hundreds of heroes buried here, and most of them are already forgotten, soon there will be many more among them, and one day, even I will end up here somewhere." "Then no, that won't happen, you are the best hero ever," Izuku argued, making Toshinori smile a bit at the boy's innocence. "And how many of these best heroes have already come and gone? Have you ever thought about that?" the hero asked calmly and gestured to a large tomb in the distance. "See that right there? That's the resting place of Silver Rush, a hero who used to be the number one when I was a kid, and back then people thought that he was invulnerable. Oh, and that right there, that's the card master, who was number 2 before Endeavor showed up. All Might said, as he pointed at a much newer large grave, maybe 25 yards away. "But why are you showing me this? Why, you aren't dying. Are you, All Might?" the green-haired boy asked, afraid as tears welled up in his eyes. "What? Oh no, Toshinori said as he waved his arms around nervously, trying to calm the boy down. "I just wanted you to understand what you will risk if you become a hero. Many of the people who are buried here never had the chance to start their own families, and some didn't even finish their training before they ended up here." All Might's face suddenly adopted a very serious expression. "Being a hero means putting yourself in extremely dangerous situations and putting your life on the line for people you don't even know every single day. Well, you also lose much of your own personal life. Are you sure that you want that?" the number one hero asked, his tone firm but without a hint of anger. He saw no hesitation on Izuku's face, only a bit of contemplation. "But before you tell me your answer, you also need to know that no matter how you decide, I will support your choice completely, but if you say yes, I will not let you back down, and from this day I will train you to the best of my abilities to help you achieve this goal. And to keep you safe," he added in his mind. Izuku stood there frozen with wide eyes as a gentle cool breeze softly ruffled his spiky green hair. His mind was a storm. After a few seconds of watching the boy contemplate his choices, the big man spoke again. "You don't need to decide now, you know, we can." But Izuku interrupted him before he had the chance to finish. "I'll do it," he said before he took a deep breath only to continue a second later. I want to make the world a better place, where people can just forget about their fears and be happy, and that's something only heroes can do. The boy said as he tightened his fists and raised them with determination. I will become a hero and save everyone with a smile on my face just like you, All Might. He finished excitedly. Well then it is settled, we shall start tomorrow, but first let me tell you a little secret. And so, the number one hero finally revealed the secret of his power and the story of All for One. Izuku was gobsmacked once he knew what the power coursing through his veins really was and how many times it had passed just to reach him. He felt a great honor and also responsibility. True to his words, Toshinori started training his son the next day. He bought a lot of books focusing on rescue tactics and started giving the boy homework. The day after that, he took the boy into his gym and taught him the bare basics of combat and then how to dodge attacks by throwing weak slow punches so Izuku could grasp the technique better. After just 2 weeks the boy knew how to duck and sidestep. The number one hero was overjoyed when he learned that the boy had started to keep a journal detailing the powers and possibilities of both heroes and villains whom he watched on the TV, and sometimes All Might would also provide him with helpful tips to help his research. Then a month into their training he finally allowed the boy to use One for All in its purest form, but they ran into a problem. All Might was afraid that despite the training Izuku's body would end up damaged by the power of One for All, but instead it was his jumpsuit. The air friction from just 3 punches was enough to tear down the boy's sleeve clean off his arm. The number one hero immediately understood the danger of this happening in a fight. If his body copied the enemy's quirk during combat, it could destroy both of them in mere seconds once it fused with One for All. And so, they improved the outfit by adding black heavy-duty welding gloves during their sessions. One day Toshinori took Izuku to a deserted beach full of junk and just gave him a few simple instructions to start cleaning the mess up without the use of his quirks. It was grueling work, but after a few weeks, he could already feel the difference in his strength and see the difference he was making on the beach, which made him proud of his work. Whenever Izuku wasn't hanging around with his friends or studying, he was training. It was almost scary to see such incredible tenacity from someone so young. And all that tenacity paid off. Just a year later he quickly gained even more muscle weight, but also incredible agility, which brought some rather interesting problems for the boy. Love letters. After a few PE classes in middle school he was finding them everywhere. In his locker, under his plate at lunch, in his bag, on his desk, and of course many have been handed to the boy personally. And the contents of these love letters were just disturbing. Dear Izuku. Ever since I first laid my eyes on you, I knew that we were meant to be together. I love watching you work out and I just can't help myself. I can't sleep at night thinking about how good you look. I know that little bitch Mika has you wrapped around your little finger, but don't worry, I will save you from her. Love, your secret admirer. Wow, girls sure are scary, Shinso commented as he finished reading the piece of paper his friend handed him. Right. I don't even know a girl named Maiko. He said in panic as he began rummaging through his pockets. This one thinks that the two of us are dating, and this one even left her underwear with a letter. And that's just for today, help me Hitachi. He announced as he slammed 2 more letters on his desk. I don't know what to tell you Izuku, they won't quit until you choose one. Shinso said with a sigh, sad that he was unable to help his friend, but then an idea struck him. 2 days later. Let me get this straight, you want me to be your pretend girlfriend, so the girls leave you alone. Why don't you ask one of the girls from your school? Momo asked as she eyed both boys suspiciously. Well, we wanted to, but that person would immediately become a target and we don't want that to happen. Izuku said, and Shinso nodded in approval. We just need to make the girls believe that he already has a girlfriend, so the girls stop sending him those creepy letters. All you need to do is to go on a few fake dates with Izuku, and once the girls see that he's off limits, they will stop fighting over him and leave him alone. The girl sighed and gave them a look of disapproval. This whole thing was just so weird, she always saw Izuku almost as her little brother, which made everything even worse. Please Momo, help me. I think they are stalking me. They even know where I do my training. It's like they are always there, just watching and scheming. Izuku begged after sensing her hesitation. Seeing the desperation on his face made her feel bad for her friend, and so, she chose to ignore that weird feeling in the pit of her stomach. Fine, but when I get stabbed on the way home, I will come back just to hunt you all. Momo finally agreed, and the group set their plan into motion the next Sunday. On Sunday. It was a nice day for winter, the sun was softly shining over the city, and a few soft pure snowflakes drifted through the air, only to softly land on the busy streets. Most people were out doing their Christmas shopping, and Momo was sitting on a bench, searching the crowded street with her eyes for her shorter green-haired friend. She was waiting for maybe 5 minutes when rapid footsteps quickly approached her as Izuku burst from the crowd, wheezing a bit. She gave him a once-over and had to do a double take because she could hardly recognize him. Izuku's normally spiky unkempt hair was now unnaturally slicked back, revealing his forehead a bit. "Izuku, what happened to you?" she asked as the boy sat down next to her to catch his breath. "Sorry for being late, but when mom found out that I was going on a date, she would not let me leave until she brushed my hair," he said in between gasps. Normally running this distance wouldn't be any problem, but the cold winter air really did a number on his lungs. The slightly taller lady soon noticed that he was holding a small yellow paper bag. "What's that anyway?" she asked, pointing at the little bag. "Oh yeah, it's for you," he said as if he just remembered what he was holding in his hand and offered it to her. "For me?" she said as she accepted the object. She opened it only to find 4 still warm homemade cinnamon rolls inside. She also said that I should bring a gift for a first date and she wouldn't let me leave unless I took something with me. I tried to tell her that it's a fake date, but she said that it didn't matter because I are in CzereLion. He started to mutter in panic. "It's okay, Izuku, don't worry about it," she said, waving her hand around dismissively as she tried to stop the boy's embarrassed mumbling. She always thought that this nervously flustered side of him was kind of cute, especially since this flustered boy was physically strong enough to tear an adult person limb from limb. Not that he would ever attempt something like that, but it painted a funny contrast. After this small exchange, both of them stayed silent, looking at one another. It was a weird moment since neither knew what to do now. Then it turned even more awkward. "Such nice weather, right?" Momo deadpanned and mentally slapped herself for saying something like that whilst it was literally snowing. "Yeah, it's nice, huh?" Izuku mirrored, looking around at the wind slowly picking up its speed. This exchange only led them both to look at their feet in embarrassment and to think the same thing. "If this is what dating feels like, I would rather stay single for the rest of my life." However, as fate would have it, a pigeon chose this time to seat itself on the branch directly over Izuku's head, which sent a small heap of snow tumbling down on his head and behind his neck under his jacket. "So cold," he yelped, quickly taking off his jacket and shaking off the quickly melting mess. Seeing this made Momo giggle before she came closer to him and brushed off most of the white chunks out of his hair with her gloved hands. This action, however, also restored Izuku's hair to its original state. "There, much better," Momo commented as she helped Izuku straighten his jacket. It was a weird feeling for the boy. For a while he felt frozen in place when he noticed just how close she was standing to him. Were her eyes always so pretty? This single thought brought a small wave of warmness to his cheeks, which then brought forth a different kind of awkwardness. It was not a bad feeling, however. It felt strangely right. "So, what's the plan?" Momo asked, bringing Izuku out of his little universe in the process. "Why yeah, Shinso will be watching from afar. He knows the girls from our school and he'll tell us if anyone starts tailing us," he announced as he pulled out a small All Might themed walkie-talkie out of his pocket, nearly dropping it in the process. She looked around and quickly spotted their purple-haired friend at the other end of the street, wearing a heavy jacket, scarf, and a pair of sunglasses, which hid most of his face. The boy made a little wave as they made eye contact. "This is control testing. Do you hear me, Romeo? Over," the device suddenly announced. Momo was taken aback a little by their collective goofiness. "For God's sake, they are even using codenames. Hearing you loud and clear, control. Over. Okay, there is a small cafe with large windows just 2 streets to the south. Your objective is to slowly make your way there whilst making playful banter with Juliet. Over. Commencing mission. Over," he said and turned to Momo, who was already giggling after she witnessed their little professional exchange. "So Romeo and Juliet?" she asked good-humoredly, and Izuku blushed harder. "It was Hitashi's idea," he said very quickly and looked away, making Momo laugh. The date went along perfectly. The pair almost forgot that they had a spectator by the time they reached the small family business. However, just as they made their order, the walkie-talkie came back to life. "Alert. Romeo, you have Yuki from class 2C3 booths behind you. Don't make eye contact. I repeat, don't make eye contact. Over," Shinso announced, and Izuku immediately felt immensely nervous. There was no way he could act natural in this sort of situation. Momo saw her friend's gloved hands tremble and she felt bad for him. The slightly taller girl knew Izuku well, and it was clear that this whole thing took a big toll on his mind. And so, she reached over and gently grasped one of his hands on her own. "Hey, it's okay. I am here," she said with a slightly manlier voice and flexed her nearly non-existent bicep with a small smile, emulating his favorite hero. Izuku clearly didn't expect this, but soon his eyes widened and a smile returned to his face, only to then adopt a face perfectly similar to his father. "Thank you," he said, flawlessly imitating All Might's voice. Momo first let out a giggle which then evolved into a full laughter. "That was so perfect. she said, and then realized that she was still holding his hand. A slight barely noticeable blush appeared on her cheeks as she let go. As this all unfolded, Shinso secretly took a few photos of them and Yuki as evidence with his phone. They finished their drinks and left the establishment heading for their new location. An arcade. That's when the walkie-talkie turned on again. "Hey Romeo, I see Sarah from our class tailing you." Over. "What? The quiet girl? Are you sure? Control." Over. "Engaging hostile." Over. Hitachi quietly announced before he tapped her shoulder. "What is Shinso?" Sarah asked, confused as she turned around and saw the purple-haired boy standing behind her. "Hey, you are Sarah, right?" Shinso asked with a friendly tone. "Yeah, what do you want?" She started, but stopped as he activated his quirk. "Leave my friend alone, go home and think about your life," the boy commanded, and the girl simply turned around and left. Target neutralized. Romeo. Resuming surveillance. Over. Shinso again whispered into the device and started following them again. "Thanks, Control." Over. Izuku sighed and resumed walking. "Wow, he really gets into character," Momo commented whilst looking at the girl leaving in a hurry. "Yeah, he's really." Izuku suddenly stopped talking and the black-haired girl glanced at him to see what happened, only to see her boyfriend transfixed by a large poster proudly displayed next to the arcade entrance. "Special gaming tournament. Enter and gain a chance to win the one and only All Might Anniversary Independence Day Special Edition action figure in original American packaging. Will you be the one to leave the tournament with one of the rarest action figures in history? Come and find out. Only 1500 yen to enter. 1500 hours, today." Izuku was speechless. This was the most sought-after All Might action figure on the market. He only heard legends about this fan item. Only 50 of these were made and shipped out before the factory closed down due to health and safety regulations. The legendary figure of the #1 hero pictured holding the flags of both Japan and the USA during the July 4 parade 10 years ago. His hands were sweating and he felt a little lightheaded. "I need to get it." When Momo saw the starry look in his eyes, she already knew that there was nothing to stop the shorter boy from entering this tournament. And so, they walked in and signed up. Shinso meanwhile bought a can of hot tea out of a vending machine to keep himself warm as he waited and watched for who would show up. The boy nearly spilled his drink in shock when he noticed who was standing just 20 feet from him whilst also keeping a watchful eye on the building. "Is that really?" -20 minutes later. Izuku and Momo left the arcade defeated despite being extremely familiar with the game. They ended up as first opponents to the two people who absolutely dominated the tournament, both of which were adults. "I can't believe that the centipede guy used Endeavor's invisible throw in the first round. That should be considered cheating," Izuku complained. "Tell me about it. I didn't hit my opponent once. Pretty sure he was cheating, I just don't know how." "Such treachery," Momo said tiredly. Unbeknownst to them, there was a small celebration held later that day at the Night Eye Agency. Then out of nowhere a couple of small children quickly ran past the pair, which made Momo trip, slip, and fall straight into a small puddle. "Are you okay?" Izuku asked quickly as he helped her to stand up and swiftly noticed that her jacket was now soaked. "I'm fine, it was just a tumble," she said, but the boy saw the way she started shaking and wordlessly took off his own jacket before offering it to her. "It's fine, the jumpsuit is pretty well isolated," he added when he noticed her hesitation. Momo accepted the offered garment, but once she put it on, the small pang of guilt suddenly became accompanied by a strange sensation near her heart. It was as if the organ took a minuscule break between its beats. Just then this weirdly pleasant moment was interrupted by the walkie-talkie. "Guys, we have a problem," Shinso announced. "What is it, Control?" Izuku inquired, but was met by silence before his friend spoke again. "Just come meet me in that small convenience shop in the next block, I need to show you something." Over and out. The pair shared a puzzled look before heading towards their destination. The first 5 minutes after getting there were filled at first by confusion and then horrifying realization. "Are you sure it was really Miss Akiyama?" Izuku asked for what felt like the 5th time, and Shinso just resolutely nodded. "But why would your English teacher stalk him?" Momo asked, a bit confused. "Do you want to see the pictures again? It was definitely her," the purple-haired boy said and pointed at his phone, which was currently resting between 2 sacks of potato chips and being used as an impromptu screen. Miss Akiyama was a pretty young and new teacher who started working as a faculty member just a year ago. She was quite strict and sometimes boring. Most of the students didn't like her, and those who did like her only did so because she was somewhat nice to look at. Maybe she was just waiting for someone. Izuku offered, only to be shot down by his friend immediately. "No, she was standing in the same spot and watching the arcade until you two walked out. She was definitely following you." "That's so disturbing," Momo commented. But what do we do? It's not like we can just show these pictures to the headmaster, he'll just think that we were following her on her off day. Izuku exclaimed in panic. You need to tell your parents. Momo informed much of the younger teen's horror. This whole thing was weird enough on its own, and bringing other people into this felt like an absolute nightmare. But he tried only to be interrupted by Shinso yet again. No buts, Momo's right. This is really serious, especially if she's the one writing these letters. They argued for a while until they were banished from the store by the old clerk, who suspected that the trio was shoplifting, but once outside Izuku surrendered and agreed under the condition that they would support him. All Might was luckily already home, playing pat a cake with his daughter, with Inko capturing the whole thing on camera. The explanation took some time, but by the end of it, Izuku's parents were as bewildered as the boy himself, especially after the trio showed them the letters and pictures taken by Hitachi. Inko repeatedly reassured her son that he did the right thing, and Toshinori vowed to fix the situation, and the very next day he visited the school dressed in his favorite yellow suit, which attracted many eyes. All Might was very surprised to learn that Miss Akiyama was in fact not a pervy stalker, but the whole situation took an even more surprising turn when he found out that she wasn't a certified teacher either. After a stern talk, Toshinori even managed to find out about her actual employer, the Hero Public Safety Commission. As it turns out, his son was being watched by the Japanese version of the FBI without his knowledge. This new information left him seething. And so that very same day he took his first official day off to sort this whole mess out. -4 hours later. All Might, you need to understand, calmly said the woman currently serving as the commission president, only to be interrupted by the much taller and much more intimidating hero. No, there is nothing more to understand. You have gone behind my back and you have been spying on my son as if he was a high-level threat since he was just 4 years old, praying that I wouldn't find out about it. All Might angrily proclaimed. It was crystal clear to everyone present at the emergency meeting that the number one hero was absolutely furious, and that alone was enough to terrify them. They all viewed All Might as the golden standard for heroes everywhere. The man was kind, calm, and collected even when facing unspeakable danger. So, if you manage to make someone like that angry, you know that you messed up royally. We need to be rational. Your son represents a serious danger to every person around him. We cannot ignore that. Exclaimed someone from the back row, which caused the hero to turn in that direction. You should be so kind and present evidence for your claim. It shouldn't be very hard after 9 years of tight surveillance, right? Toshinori responded, feeling a bit cheeky, but he knew that he was right, and so did everyone present in the room. In those 9 years, not once did Izuku abuse his quirk, nor did he gain any more powers. Silence filled the room. No one there wanted to argue with the pro. Seeing as no one was willing to speak, All Might chose to continue. Every day since he was 4 years old, he wakes up, brushes his teeth, and puts on his suit before stepping outside, and not once did he argue against your countermeasure or complain about it. In fact, ever since his sister was born, he also started wearing that thing at home, scared that he would somehow harm her if he didn't. He spoke and looked at the crowd in front of him. Some of the representatives averted their sights from him. The hero talked to the board members like this for what felt like hours, and whenever someone presented an argument, he swiftly disproved it, and by the end of the meeting, they had no choice but to surrender, especially after Toshinori threatened to bring the whole thing into public's eye. It turns out that a mental image of an article titled HPSC, unlawfully spied on All Might's son, was very convincing and terrifying. The number one hero wasn't angry about the surveillance, but he was extremely mad about what this meant. The surveillance of a minor was not unprecedented, but it was reserved only for children that were considered to be exceptionally dangerous for society. Minors that either suffered from a mental sickness and/or were already criminally active. This meant that to even issue this order, they had to officially classify Izuku as a villain suspect, and his father wouldn't stand for it. That day he returned home with an official surveillance order repeal, and Izuku's teacher was soon after replaced by a normal one. Toshinori decided that it would be better to keep this whole thing secret from both his wife and son, since he didn't want to cause them any more stress. It's one thing when you are being watched by some perv, but when you learn that the government was watching you for 9 goddamn years, it messes with you on an entirely different level. Izuku and his friends were very excited to learn that his teacher handed over her resignation and was soon replaced by a pretty nice guy named Adam Tanaka just a week later. However, that is not the only thing that changed after this whole fiasco. Momo and Izuku started spending more time together after they discovered just how much they liked each other's company, though whenever someone around them mentioned the word date and their names in the same sentence, their faces were swiftly replaced by something akin to a freshly picked tomatoes, whilst they hastily explained that they are just good friends. It was an interesting year for the green-haired teen. His training and All Might's teaching methods have gotten even more intense. How is a hero supposed to act during a rescue operation? The number one hero asked as he threw a left hook at his son. Kind, calm, and reassuring. Izuku shouted back as he ducked under the hero's wide swing. Even though this entire thing could be considered as child abuse, Izuku was extremely grateful for every minute of his training. Besides, thanks to many years of practice, All Might had incredible muscle control, which made him able to stop anything he threw at Izuku mid-swing if he felt that it could actually cause any harm to the boy. Izuku tried to launch a counter-attack to the midsection, but the tall man caught his arm in a crushing grip and lifted the teen up to eye level. "What's the article that forbids excessive force during arrest?" Toshinori asked with a big smile just 10 inches away from the teen's face. The green-haired boy knew that look. It meant you either answer this right or you are going down. 217. Izuku tried nervously. Wrong. All Might yelled and swung his arm in an attempt to slam the boy into the mat they were standing on. Izuku felt the pang of panic in his mind and tried to soften his inevitable impact. However, as he grasped the hero's arm with his free hand, this motion generated far more force than he expected, which somehow made his knee jerk upwards and hit Toshinori straight in the nose. All Might obviously didn't expect this to happen, and the shock combined with the impact and the explosion of pain made him let go. The boy landed relatively softly and watched as the hero took a step back and clutched his nose, which was now bleeding a little. The feeling of panic immediately returned, and this time it was combined with guilt. "Oh geez, All Might. Are you okay? I am so sorry, I don't mean to." The teen quickly started mumbling out an apology, only to be stopped by the hero's thunderous laughter. "That was a perfect counterattack. I never saw it coming. Good job." All Might happily exclaimed as he cracked his nose back into its correct state, and he was absolutely beaming as he did so. "Wait, you aren't mad?" Izuku asked, a bit dumbfounded. "Mad? Why would I be, my boy? This is called combat training for a reason, and besides, it's nothing compared to what happened during my own training. That was a great move, so don't sweat it," the tall man said excitedly, wiping the blood off his face with a towel. "Oh okay. Well, that's enough for today. How about we get some ice cream?" the hero said and offered another towel to his son. A few days later. And then he said, "Let's get ice cream." How cool is that? Izuku ended describing the events that transpired to his friend with a smile on his face. "Can you lend me your dad for a week?" deadpan Todoroki, which confused the boy a bit. "I don't think that's how it works, Shoto." "Oh. Okay." Shoto said, looking a bit disappointed and bringing a bit of an awkward silence over the group. "Anyway, what's with Hitachi? Why didn't he come with you?" Momo asked, breaking the weird silence. "Yes, you are right, we haven't seen him for 2 weeks, is he okay? His sudden disappearance will no doubt bring negative effects to our group dynamic." Iida chipped in. He, just like everyone, grew accustomed to their insomniac friend's presence. "I'm not so sure, he just stopped talking to me and he seems distracted every time I try to ask him about it. I don't know what to do, guys. Just today I asked him if he wants to come here, but he said that he already had something important to do." Iida's glasses shined dangerously as he clasped his hand on Izuku's shoulder. "And you call yourself his friend? Have you checked for dilated pupils and needle marks? Have you at least taken a hair sample?" the blue-haired boy asked as he shook his slightly shorter friend. "I don't think Hitashi's taking drugs, Tenya. Calm down." Momo exclaimed as both she and Shoto pried him off Izuku. This behavior didn't shock them much. Iida was always like the overprotective mother of the group, and they all came to accept that, although having someone your own age who demands to see your report card still felt a bit odd. After they managed to calm him down, they decided that it would be best to gather as much information as possible. Thus, started the Operation Eagle Eye. Izuku tried to gather some info from his purple-haired friend, which went about as good as you can imagine, and the other boy simply started carefully avoiding the taller teen whenever he had the chance. Secondly, Iida attempted to follow him when Shinso left school to see where the boy was heading, but he too failed and was soon discovered. Tenya tried to apply a more direct approach after being found out, and the purple-haired teen left after telling him to leave him alone. This little incident made Hitachi cautious, rendering all other tailing attempts impossible. However, it also revealed something very important to them. That Shinso was ashamed or at least secretive about whatever was going on. Next, they tried to look in his favorite places. The bookshop he often visited, his favorite arcade, and even the cafe he recommended for their earlier mission, but everywhere they were met with the same answers. None of the employees saw him for the last couple of weeks. It was a weird situation, and none of his friends knew what they should do. But luck smiled on them one day. Izuku desperately needed a new pair of shoes because his old ones had cracks in their soles, and so he took a break from his training regimen to do some shopping. It was hard to find some that would fit him just right, thus he spent his entire afternoon walking around the many sportswear shops throughout the city. But as soon as he walked into store number 6, he immediately hurried back out. He saw him, his purple-haired friend was already there, sitting on a stool and trying on new shoes. It was a very rare opportunity and Izuku would not let it slip. So, he abandoned his current quest and waited hidden behind a trash can nearby. Shinso walked out with a shoebox under his arm maybe 5 minutes later and headed to the closest train station. Izuku watched his friend get aboard, waited for a few seconds before getting on himself. Luckily there were a few hero cosplayers aboard, but not too many to pose any risk to Izuku's quirk, and so he slipped into the crowd and kept an eye on his friend. They traveled a few stations before Shinso got up and left the train. Izuku wanted to follow, but a hand tapped his shoulder. He turned around only to see probably the greasiest guy he has ever met. This guy had to weigh 200 pounds at the very least, which combined with the fact that he was dressed as a smaller version of Fat Gum, made him look like a masked misshapen potato. And what are you supposed to be? Hey, wait, don't I know you from some convention, boy? Sorry, I am kinda in a her. What's that insane quality costume under your jacket? It looks so real. Is that a real polyester carbon fiber mixture? That must have been hella expensive. Said a busty girl next to him in a Morocco cosplay while pointing at his gloved hand. Really? It's just glue, but I really need to. Hey, can I take a selfie? Asked someone dressed as Endeavor while already pulling out his phone. To his panic Izuku noticed that the doors to the train car were already beginning to close. He had to think fast. It was prohibited to use a quirk while inside public transport, so he needed to improvise. Wait, look, it's Ingenium. He exclaimed and pointed at the nearby window. The effect was immediate, the cosplayers quickly lost their interest and moved closer to the glass to catch a glimpse of the famous hero. Izuku saw his opportunity, rushed forward, and leapt through the door just before it slammed shut. He looked around, but his purple-haired friend was nowhere to be seen. The taller boy left the station in search of Hitachi, but he soon realized the hopelessness of his attempt. There were people in all directions, but none of them sported Shinso's iconic hair color. After another 10 minutes Izuku gave up and returned to his previous objective, disappointed. He walked the busy streets looking for another clothing store, but road repairs ahead forced him to change his course away from the main street. The boy wandered through the residential area he ended up in, a bit confused by the unknown surroundings, and that's when he heard it. God damn it. What the hell is wrong with me? Why won't it work? Izuku immediately recognized the distress shouting filled with anger. It was definitely Shinso. He hurried in the general direction of the sound, and there he saw him. His friend was sitting on a bench with his hands covering his eyes. His chest was heaving, and a few tears slipped through the slim gaps between his fingers, only to fall on the pavement. Hitachi, are you okay? Did something happen? Izuku asked worriedly as he made his way closer to his friend. Shinso reacted quickly and used his sleeves to wipe his eyes when he heard the boy's voice. I'm fine, a branch just hit me in the face, he responded while avoiding eye contact with his green-haired friend. But there are no trees around here. Come on, tell me what's wrong, we are all worried about it. It was then that Izuku noticed that his friend was completely soaked in sweat. Just leave me alone. Shinso said a bit more forcefully and stood only to keel over slightly, forcing Izuku to catch him before he hit the ground. You don't look okay, Hitachi. Should I call you an ambulance? He asked as he helped his friend to sit down. No, it's fine, I just probably pulled something in my leg. The purple-haired boy said with a defeated tone and rubbed his thigh to relieve the pain he felt. Izuku took a step forward to check his friend for any more injuries, but he accidentally stepped on something. A notebook. He picked it up and out of curiosity checked the page that opened when the thing fell on the ground. 3.1. 830. 4.1. 826. 5.1. 831. Hey, give that back. Shinso said angrily, extended his arm and tore the notebook from Izuku's hands. This caught Izuku completely off guard, he couldn't even remember when he saw his friend act so aggressively. They shared a short look until the purple-haired boy averted his gaze, his facial features softening. Sorry, Izuku, I didn't. No, it's fine, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. We are just so worried about you, but don't worry, I will tell the others to leave you alone, just please if you ever need anything, you can always tell us, okay? We'll be there for you. Izuku said with a small kind smile. He took a step back and got ready to leave sad and angry at himself, even though he knew that maybe his friend just needed a bit of space. And so, turned around and took a few steps away from the shorter teen. Wait, Izuku, the other boy interrupted. Izuku stopped and turned back to face his hopefully curious friend. What is Hitachi? He asked calmly. Can you please take a seat? I want to tell you something. Sure, no problem. The muscular teen said and sat down next to his friend. Almost 3 weeks earlier. I am such an idiot. Shinso just opened his locker. The second period was just about to start and he had forgotten his math textbook inside. He quickly grabbed it and hurried to his classroom, however just as he made the corner and headed up the stairs, he passed by a group of 3 upperclassmen and overheard their conversation. That's great. Anyway, have you heard about Saburo? You mean that guy who tried for the UA this year? This piqued Shinso's interest and so he stopped just out of sight to listen some more. Yep, I heard those robots really did a number on him, good thing they have that recovery hero there as the school nurse. Wait, they still use robots? Guess UA really is all about raw power. When Shinso heard those words, he felt very skeptical. They are wrong, right? What could they know about the entrance exam? At that time, Shinso just made his way back to the classroom and forgot all about it, but the memory surfaced again when he was lying in bed. Out of curiosity he took his phone and searched for the UA entrance exam. The school's website didn't provide much information, only that the exam had 2 parts, one written and the other practical, so he searched the web until he found a forum where someone gave an in-depth description of what their UA entrance exam was like and why they failed. As Shinso read this, he felt as if the whole world was falling apart around him. There was no way his quirk would work on robots, and any weapons that didn't have anything to do with the person's quirk were strictly forbidden. That night he didn't sleep at all, nor did he sleep the night after. So, he started searching for a way to get there without the exam, and after a while, he actually found it. The US recommendation entrance exam. It consisted of 3 parts, a written test, a practical test, and an interview, however after several hours of searching, he didn't find anything about robots being part of the equation, though it was only for exceptional students, and from the info he found online, he would need to be among the 4 best students just to be accepted. It was a long shot, but he was willing to take it if it meant a chance of getting into the hero course. And so, he started training. His first attempt at a 2-kilometer run ended with a time of 8 minutes and 23 seconds. It was not a bad start, but it was nowhere near perfect. So, he tried again the next day with the result of 8:20. Shinso was feeling optimistic until his next attempt ended with 8:30 and then the next one with 8:36. He knew he had to do more, so he searched for hints and advice on how to improve his time, but all failed, and he hasn't registered any positive change in 3 weeks, even after dedicating all of his free time to training. Present time. But why didn't you tell us? It's nothing to be ashamed of. Izuku asked and put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. I don't know. You are all working so hard, I just didn't want to bother you. He said slowly and once again averted his gaze. They sat there in silence for a few minutes, after which Izuku helped his friend to stand up and they went back to their train station together. The next day. Do you have any idea how worried we were, Hitachi? How irresponsible can you be? He yelled when he finally understood the situation, as Shoto, Momo, and Izuku held him back to protect their insomniac friend. Sorry guys, I don't know what came over me. The purple-haired boy apologized again, and after a while of robotic hand chops and dangerously glinting glasses, Tenyu calmed down sufficiently. But what do we do anyway? It's not like we can cheat. Momo noted. Well. Don't you start, Shoto. Tenyu reprimanded. I'm just saying it's a possibility, not that we should do it. No, it's not. Shinso interrupted, bringing everyone's attention back to himself. If I can't get into the UA with my own skills, there's no point trying. Well, that just leaves us with one option. You will have to train like hell. Said Izuku, meeting Shinso's gaze with his own. The purple-haired boy sighed and looked at his new shoes. I know, you all mean well, and I would do pretty much anything to get there, but there is no point, I tried, remember? For 3 weeks and on your own. We still have a year to get you in top shape. Izuku exclaimed, and everyone except Shinso nodded. The boy in question just stared at them surprised. You guys would really do that for me? Shinso asked and looked at his friends, who only responded with another resolute nod. He could feel his eyes get moist again when he saw just how determined they were to help him achieve his dream. By the end of their short conversation, only one question remained on Hitashi's mind. How did I deserve such great friends? Though he would also soon learn just how ruthless they could be as trainers. Momo and Tenyu took positions as his personal tutors. It was clear that to pass the exam, he would need to get as close to a perfect score as humanly possible, which also meant that they couldn't accept any mistakes. In the first week he saw his amount of homework double and then triple the next week. Shoto masterfully used his cold facade and shrewd nature to become the perfect interview instructor, and he wielded these weapons perfectly to absolutely destroy any attempt Shinso made every single week and deconstruct it to point out his mistakes. Finally, Izuku was put in charge of Shinso's physical training, and if the boy thought that the other parts of his training were torturous enough on their own, Izuku showed him something truly infernal. They would run each and every day until Hitashi's knees started to shake like crazy, and the cardio sessions filled with a lot of jump rope and gymnastics made him feel as if he was dying. Yet after a month of this torture, an improvement finally appeared. Shinso's grades started greatly improving, and soon he was at the top of his class, sometimes even completely ahead of everyone else. His stamina and flexibility also changed for the better, his time slowly but surely reaching the 8-minute mark, only to beat it with a time of 7 minutes and 56 seconds a day later. Even though he felt tired as hell and his muscles screamed for him to stop, he was so happy he could cry. The last thing that remained was for them to find someone who would recommend the boy for the exam. A task that would prove to be rather easy to manage. Are you sure about this, Izuku? I know you really like your friend, but I can't write more than one recommendation a year. If I write one for your friend, you will have to take the regular entrance exam like everyone else. The tall hero proclaimed, whilst slowly rocking his small daughter to sleep. The little girl couldn't help but coo and sometimes even giggled during the gentle ride. He was surprised when Izuku broached the topic, but he understood his son's sentiment. I know All Might, but it's totally okay. I know that I can get in without it. I will think about it, but first I would like to have a chat with your friend. Can you bring him here tomorrow? Of course. Izuku said, perfectly imitating the man in front of him, and gave a thumbs up. I told you to stop doing that. You will wake her up again. Toshinori said in a lowered tone as he felt his daughter stir in his grasp. Oh no. Sorry, old habits. Appa. Mayumi chimed in, reaching her tiny arms towards the hero's face once again fully awake and energetic. All Might smiled gently at his daughter. He was very familiar with this situation, and so he lifted her up so she could play with his tuft of blonde hair, like she always loved to. Bring him around 5 in the afternoon. Okay, I will try to get home a bit early. Okay, the hero said, seemingly unbothered by the fact that there were now 2 baby legs currently flopping around before his eyes. Sure thing. Izuku confirmed and left the room, leaving All Might to play with Mayumi some more. The next day. Shinso was feeling nervous like never before. He has met Izuku's dad a few times already, but today was different. The man who could give him the chance that would determine the rest of his life was sitting just 2 meters from him with an iconic smile that would put a crocodile to shame. Not to mention being so close to someone larger than life just never got old. So tell me, young Shinso, why do you want to become a hero? Toshinori finally asked the boy who was very close to freaking out. That's a really loaded question, Mr. Yagi. Nonsense, this is not a test, there are no right or wrong answers. I personally know a few heroes who started only to make an impression on the opposite sex. Can't be much worse than that. All Might said with a friendly tone. Well, if you insist, the purple-haired boy said, before taking a calming breath to sort out his thoughts a bit. I think it started before elementary. I just saw all those people in flashy suits doing good things, and I thought I want to be a part of that, but everyone just always assumes that I will end up as a villain. He admitted with a small sigh. Doesn't seem that way to me, besides Izuku is great when it comes to choosing his friends. Toshinori said as he tried to lift the teen's mood a bit. I know, but people like him are the exception. Everyone just thinks that I will become a villain with my quirk, but he explained, but then stopped himself. You ask me why I want to become a pro, and you probably think that it's just because I want to prove everyone wrong, but the truth is I can't put the true reason into words. It's just something in me that wants me to help people feel safe. I am sorry, but I can't really answer your question. Shinso's expression saddened, as he thought that he messed up in some way. Don't worry about it, if anything it just shows that your heart is in the right place. The hero explained, his smile unwavering. Now for my second and last question, can you show me your quirk? Shinso's face adopted an expression of complete shock and disbelief. But I can't do that. I would have to brainwash you, and. Oh please, I'm pretty sure I've experienced worse. Come on, show me. The hero encouraged confidently. Oh okay, here goes. He said and extended his arm towards the blonde man. All Might waited patiently, unsure if anything was happening. Well, are you? He tried to speak only to stop a second later, unable to move. His mind was feeling hazy, as if a thick fog completely enveloped his thoughts and left him feeling helpless. I'm sorry, my quirk is voice activated and it only works if the other person responds to what I say. Shinso explained before he stood up, walked over to the hero, and carefully pinched his arm. The reaction was imminent. All Might twitched and took a few deep breaths to force the grogginess out of his mind. The purple-haired teen thought that he was in trouble when he saw the hero's reaction. But Toshinori stood up a second later with a full smile back and clasped the teen's shoulder with his massive hand. I see that my son is right about you, that is one of the most powerful and useful quirks I have ever seen. I am glad you are on our side. I can't wait to watch you grow young. Does that mean? Yes, I will recommend you, but remember, this is not even close to a victory. Your friends and I might pave the road for you, but you have to walk it yourself. Good luck. The hero exclaimed and watched as a tear escaped one of Shinso's eyes when the boy smiled. Itachi was so incredibly grateful for the chance he was given, and he doubled the efforts on his training with a singular thought in his mind. I will not let this chance go to waste, no matter what. -9 months later. All Might landed softly on the penthouse balcony in the middle of the night. Tired, sweaty, and clutching a gift-wrapped box. He felt racked with guilt as if he had just committed a heinous crime. Today was his daughter's birthday, and of course a group of villains had to pick this day to cause so much trouble to keep him occupied for 16 hours straight. The large man entered his home quietly, only to be met with a now familiar sight of his wife sleeping on the couch. He knew that she must have been here waiting for him to come home for hours until exhaustion finally overtook her and brought her into the blissful embrace of sleep. He sighed, gently picked up Inko's limp body and carried her to bed to help her avoid neck pains from the uncomfortable position the piece of cushioned furniture provided. After making sure that she looked comfortable and warm enough, he left the room and went to check on his daughter. He passed by his son's room and walked to the end of the hallway where he opened the door decorated with many hand-drawn flowers. Mayumi's room was filled with all kinds of toys and pictures. There were plushies, dolls, race cars, and even a large train track going around the room, which they built for her with his son. Despite the many obstacles, he managed to quietly make his way to her small bed in absolute silence. Just as he was about to take a look at her, he was interrupted by a soft whine. He looked at his feet only to see Hiro rolled up next to bed with one eye lazily opened and the other tightly shut. Big faithful protector, huh? Toshinori thought as he got down and gave the massive dog a good scratch, only for the creature to fall back asleep only a few seconds later. The husky was getting older, yet the years did little to quell his protective nature. He peered at his daughter sleeping peacefully next to her favorite purple stuffed fox doll. Toshinori smiled as he reached out his hand and gently brushed away a few strands of hair to get a better look at her face. It's been a few weeks since her quirk first manifested, which was quite a traumatic event for his wife. -24 days ago. Ready or not, here I come. Inko announced as she turned around to look for her daughter. It was a beautiful day outside, and so they went to a nearby playground. Mayumi loved the swings, but even they got boring after a while, and so the game of hide and seek began. The green-haired woman searched and searched, but her daughter was nowhere to be found. Luckily, she had a secret weapon exactly for this situation. Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? She asked loudly in a sing-song voice. SpongeBob SquarePants. The little girl yelled as she jumped from a nearby bush with her hands aimed at the sky. Oh, there you are. Her mother said as she picked the little preschooler up and gave her an Eskimo kiss. Mommy, can we get ice cream? She asked, still unable to get rid of her little lisp, but she was getting there. Sure thing, sweetie, mommy just needs to take out her wallet, she said, but then she noticed a bit of red on her daughter's sleeve. Inko immediately put her daughter down, checked her over, and sure enough, there was a small bleeding scratch on the back of her hand. It was most likely caused by the bush. When Mayumi noticed what caught her mother's attention, it brought tears into her tiny eyes. Don't worry sweetie, it will be okay, I have a band-aid in here, you just need to be a brave girl before I find it. Okay. Inko reassured her and then turned around quickly and started rummaging through her bag. Where is it? Where is it? Why do I carry so many tissues with me? Mommy. She heard her daughter say nervously. Just give me a second sweetheart. Inko said when her fingers finally grasped the pack of band-aids. She turned back to her daughter and froze when she saw her. Her skin, eyes, hair, lips, everything was green. She took an involuntary step back in shock only to then discover an even more shocking detail. Her shoes were torn apart and, in the area where Mayumi's feet normally would be, were now thick roots embedded in the ground. Mommy, this feels weird. The mother in question quickly recovered from her surprise and offered a kind smile to the little girl. It's a normal sweetie, it's just you quirk, just like mommy's, see? Inko said in her best calming tone and for demonstration levitated a small stone from the ground into her hand. The look of fear on Mayumi's face was immediately replaced by one of wonder and excitement as she looked over her body. Wow, just as she uttered that one little word, a bunch of tiny flowers of many colors bloomed in her hair, almost as if the quirk itself attempted to further show her exhilaration. Let's take a look at that hand, okay sweetie? Mayumi simply responded and lifted her hand to allow her mother better access. However, Inko quickly noticed that her hand had a completely different color when compared to the rest of her body. It was yellowish brown, and it looked as if it was made of an extremely old and dry paper. Maybe this means that she's already healing. The woman thought as she gently embraced her daughter's hand on her own. Then it happened. Both Mayumi and Inko screamed at the same time when the smaller hand suddenly came off and crumpled like an old dried up leaf. There was no pain involved, but both were just so freaked out that panic was unavoidable. Luckily, they both calmed down after the hand miraculously regrew a few seconds later, but it was still a scarring event for the two of them. Naturally, they took the small girl to a quirk specialist, even though her skin, hair, and eye color all turned back to normal before they even arrived. The results came only a day later. Mayumi Quirk. Flora. This quirk allows its user complete control over the vegetation in a nearby area, as well as granting the user's body the use of plant-based powers, such as photosynthesis. The full extent of her powers is currently unknown. It turns out that she inherited the power of her great-grandfather, a first-generation quirk user, whose powers allowed the man limited photosynthetic powers through his green hair, which then granted his descendants their distinctive green hair, although none of his abilities. And so armed with this knowledge, she began, like most other children her age, experimenting with her powers. Her first victim was a potted plant on the balcony. She played with that thing every day, and once she even managed to make the ponytail palm bloom like a rose, and then presented every person in her family with these mysterious flowers. Now, she was growing so fast right in front of his eyes. Pretty soon she would start going to kindergarten, then elementary school, and after that she would no longer be his little girl, she would turn into a little lady. Just how much more am I going to miss out on? He carefully put the box on her nightstand and left the room, heading for a shower. The thought remained on his mind as the warm water washed away the sweat and soreness from his body. The guilt only multiplied when he caught himself having a thought which he never guessed he would experience. Am I really thinking about quitting? For the last year he felt as if he was standing on a rope bridge over a deep ravine. On one side there were dozens upon dozens of people relying on him to help them, while on the other his family was waiting there for him. Each day he had to make the same exact choice, and it was slowly becoming harder and harder for him, as if the ropes on this metaphorical bridge were becoming looser and looser with every single use. Oh, how much he envied the common salaryman with his steady 9-to-5 job. If only heroing was that easy. But then an idea struck his mind, and he realized that options like that still existed, though it would be extremely hard in the short term. He could make it work. All he would need is to give a phone call to one extremely smart and mysterious scarred little chimera. -11 months later. And it's official, Tenya, Izuku is taller by half an inch. Shinso announced as he handed his blue-haired friend back the tape measure. What are your parents feeding you? Asked the bespectacled teen, dumbfounded by the new information. It was weird since both Izuku and Iida were growing at the same rate for the last year, but then one day Iida's growth spurt suddenly stopped whilst Izuku's just kept going. By now, Izuku was almost as tall as his brother, which was becoming unnerving. I have a theory. Todoroki announced calmly, raising his hand. Shoto, for the last time I am not All Might's love child. Izuku sighed and rubbed her forehead in exasperation. It was a nice change to experience the playful interactions between the members of their small group once again. After all, for the last month they had done nothing but train and study their hearts out to improve their chances of being accepted into the school of their dreams. Tomorrow was the day of the recommendations exam, and Momo, Todoroki, and Shinso were all as ready as possible, and so they decided to stop cramming and just enjoy this day together. And what a nice day it was. They played a few board games, a few video games, ate a lot of unhealthy stuff, and watched some dumb movie, laughing like idiots, except for Iida, who just kept criticizing the plot points, which made the movie even funnier for the rest of them. Yet there was something bittersweet about this moment, and everyone could feel it. It was this weird feeling deep inside, just behind their hearts, because they knew that there was a very real chance that they might not all get accepted. Yet not one of them said anything, and they all just chose to treasure this day for as long as it would last. When the evening finally came, they all had only one thing on their mind. I will do this. The next day. The often feared written exam was, for the lack of a better word, a piece of cake. Thanks to his grueling, torturous studying sessions with Momo and Iida, Shinso was more than prepared for anything it could throw at him. He wasn't sure what to make out of the interview. The woman who quizzed him seemed extremely excited by the end of it, or maybe horny. It was hard to tell, since Shoto didn't prepare him for something like that. But then came the dreaded physical exam. Todoroki left the dressing room in his black gym jacket and a number 23 attached to his gray t-shirt, only for someone to barrel into him at that very second. It was a big guy, so Shoto nearly failed to catch his balance. This guy was seriously massive, even taller than Izuku. He had a buzzed haircut and an extremely dumb wide smile on his face. "What's your prob?" But before the shorter teen had a chance to finish, the guy slapped his hands on his thighs and spoke very loudly. "I am." He straightened his back. He bent backwards a little. Extremely, he bent back even further. "Sorry," he yelled as he bowed so low and so fast that his head hit the ground with a loud slam, making Shoto jump away in shock. Todoroki was even more taken aback when the man straightened once more and a little bit of blood poured out of a small scratch on his forehead, but with that dumb smile still fully visible. "What are you crazy about?" Todoroki said angrily, a bit disturbed by what he just witnessed. "No. I am Inasa, and passion means everything to me," the guy exclaimed energetically. "What?" the shorter teen asked, confused by what he just heard, but was given no answer. "Now if you excuse me, I need to get my number," Inasa said loudly as he made his way around Shoto and into the dressing room. What a weird guy, Shoto thought as he made his way to the start of the race, only to see Shinso already standing there and trying to warm up his muscles by stretching. It was then that Todoroki came to realize that he would be racing one of his best friends with an unfair advantage. It didn't sit well with him. They quickly caught up on recent events and moved into their starting positions on the track. "Good luck, Shoto. You too, Hitachi." Just when it seemed like the long-haired blonde announcer with an extremely loud voice was about to start the countdown, Inasa showed up on the track a little winded with his number attached to his tracksuit, apologizing profusely for being late. "It's no problem, listeners. Now let's go over the rules. This is a 3-kilometer obstacle course. You are permitted to use your powers as much as you like, but you mustn't leave the track or affect other runners. Now are you ready?" "Yes, we are," Inasa shouted in response, startling the other contenders and bringing happiness to present Mick in the process. "On your marks." Everyone got ready to run. Shinso and Todoroki glanced at one another one last time before setting their eyes on the prize. It's set. It's impossible to determine just how many different thoughts and emotions rushed through their heads in that very moment. It seemed as if it would go on forever. Go. Almost automatically, everyone rushed forward, but soon it became very clear who would end up as a winner. After just 15 seconds, Shoto, Inasa, and Hitachi put a wide gap between them and the rest of the competition. Hurdles were no challenge at all for the trio, especially with two of them flying right over, and Shinso knew that this wasn't a hurdle race, but an obstacle course, which meant that running around the hurdles instead of jumping over them was a viable option. The next obstacle in their path was a 30-meter-long sandpit, which slowed Inasa considerably, since he couldn't risk breaking the second rule by flinging the fine sand everywhere and hitting other runners. Shoto was able to increase his lead, and Hitachi nearly caught up to the passionate Baldi, but alas, once they left the sand he soared away just like before. Obstacle after obstacle, every single one was conquered, and competitors slowly approached the finish line. Shinso was very happy for his friend. It was clear that he and that tall guy would be the winners of this race, since they had a gap of more than 600 meters between them and the other runners. And then, they reached the end. The ice under Todoroki suddenly shifted, his feet slipped, and an attempt to correct this mistake sent him zigzagging across the track and then flung him over the finish line. This gave Inasa a great opportunity to fly past him and secure the first place. The scarred boy hit the ground pretty hard and was sent rolling before anyone could react. Hitachi saw this and sped up to see what happened to his friend. It was as if the entire race had stopped and all he could see was his friend lying sprawled on the ground. He didn't even notice it when he crossed the finish line. He rushed over to Shoto, who was just trying to get up with some help from the much taller teen. Luckily, it seemed that Todoroki received only some minor scrapes and bruises here and there. "Shoto, what happened? Are you okay?" Shinso asked in between gasps for air. "I'm fine," the teen answered calmly. "How did we do?" "I don't know. I'll go check," announced Inasa loudly, which caught the two boys completely off guard. But just as he was about to go talk to the voice hero, they were all approached by two very official-looking men. "Young man, could you come with us for a moment?" one of them asked whilst looking directly at Shoto. The teen shared a confused look with the two standing around him and then followed their lead as they led him away. 20 minutes later the boy returned, this time alone with some bad news. He was disqualified. They explained to him that when he was drifting across the track, his foot left the borders by a couple of inches. There was no denying it, the son of the number 2 hero left the recommendations exam a loser. Later that night, Shoto was pretty tired from the loud dressing down he received from his father, but he didn't let it show on his face, and so he laid tiredly in bed waiting for sleep to overtake him. Luckily, he was still able to register for the regular entrance exam, but what a pain it was to go through all that bureaucracy again. His friends were all saddened by the news, but there was nothing they could do except for Shinso, who seemed almost angry when he received the update. But just as he was about to fall asleep, his phone rang. He groggily picked the screaming device up, only to realize it was Hitachi calling him. "Hi, do you know what time it is?" he asked tiredly. However, the answer he received surprised him. "Why did you do it?" Shinso asked angrily. "What do you mean?" responded Shoto calmly, which only seemed to anger the other boy more. "I have known you for 9 years and I have never seen you slip on ice. So why did you do it?" he asked again, even though he probably already knew the answer. Hitachi said it was an accident and everyone makes mistakes. "I'm going to sleep, good night," Shoto said as he ended the call, and after a few moments slipped into a dreamless slumber with only one thought on his tired mind. It was that obvious, huh? The results were announced the next day, and by afternoon both Hitachi and Momo received an email, which informed them that they were accepted based on their results. While the black-haired lady was ready to celebrate, her insomniac friend felt conflicting emotions about the whole thing. Did he really deserve it? During the last 2 weeks none of the boys skipped a day in their training, but the time passed as wine through an open window, and before they even knew it, the exam day came. "Good luck," Big Mayumi shouted as she hugged his leg, her fingers quickly extended and wrapped around his pants like a vine. "Do you have everything? You packed your invite and other paperwork, right? Aren't you hungry? I can pack you a few snacks if you want," Inko asked worriedly while she was futilely trying to fix his wild hair. "Mom, it's fine, don't worry," Izuku proclaimed with a smile as he gently pried her hands from his head before enveloping his mother in an embrace to calm her down. However, this only caused his mother to burst into tears and exclaim something about her baby being all grown up, and of course when his sister noticed this, she also started crying. It was times like this when he wished All Might was at home, but for the past 9 months he saw the man rarely, and when he did, the number 1 hero looked extremely tired and headed straight to bed. He wasn't the only one to notice this either, the media also began documenting weird changes in his behavior. Toshinori was seen multiple times reading books while he was flying over the city, visiting public schools, and once he was spotted on campus by some students of the University of Tokyo. And every time he tried asking the tall man about this change of behavior, he was met with the same answer. "It's a surprise." And so, he stopped caring about his father's antics and instead concentrated on his own and Hitachi's training. After he finally successfully escaped his crying family members and said his goodbye, he got on the first bus heading for the station closest to UA. He was extremely jumpy when he finally made it close to the testing facility. And so, with an unsure smile and jittery legs he took the first few steps to his destiny. The written exam was held in a series of small classrooms. Math, physics, law, and English were the main subjects that appeared, and the questions that arose from these subjects were often designed to challenge not only their knowledge, but also their logical thinking. They were hard, but the green-haired boy was prepared for them. Time passed quickly, and after 2 hours the exams were finally over, and everyone was either relaxed or freaking out and trying to check whether they answered correctly. This atmosphere didn't however last very long, because the speakers mounted on the walls came to life and were cheerful. "Dear Hero Course candidates, this is the principal speaking. I know that students are often demoralized by our exams, but this year I have good news for all of you. I am happy to announce that due to a new addition to our faculty, we will be able to accept 2 more students into the Hero Course. Let this news fuel your ambitions and go beyond plus ultra." Once they heard this news, even the most nervous students were able to relax at least a little. "Now please enter the auditorium where you will be briefed about the second part of your exam." The principal finished, and every student rushed to the large room filled with hundreds of chairs. Once everyone found their seats, the lights over them turned off, and those over the podium in the front turned on, which revealed the voice hero standing there with a bright smile. "What's up, UA candidates? Thanks for tuning in to me, your school DJ. Come on, and let me hear ya." President Mick shouted, and then shivered a bit when he received no answer from the crowd in front of him. "Keeping it mellow, huh? No problem. Now this is normally where I would explain how this part of the exam is gonna go, but this year you will get a different announcer. I hope you are as excited as I am. Now please help me to welcome our newest UA faculty member." And with that the room turned pitch black again until one single spotlight lit up as the stage filled with fog. "Have no fear, students, because I am here to instruct you about how to beat this treacherous exam." They couldn't believe their own eyes when they saw the number 1 hero walk on the stage, dressed in his iconic costume. Cheers erupted wildly as every single candidate including Izuku thought the same thing. Is this real? President Mick was meanwhile standing backstage pouting like a child and enviously questioning why this never happens to him. Toshinori spent the next 10 minutes explaining the rules of the practical test and what the students should expect. The students clung to his every word. Somehow, he was even able to motivate them through his demeanor, and when by the end he yelled the school motto, there was not a soul in the auditorium who didn't respond. Izuku knew that he needed to ask All Might about everything that happened today, but right now he had a more important thing to care about, because after a very short bus ride, they arrived at the gate leading to a city replica. He didn't see Shoto or Tenya anywhere, but he quickly concluded that they probably just ended up in other groups. Suddenly the gate opened, and when heard the word go from the voice hero, his mind cleared and he rushed through the gate at superhuman speed. Izuku was moving quickly from street to street, but there weren't any robots to fight. He soon realized that he was running like a headless chicken. He needed a better plan, and so he took a massive leap to a roof of one of the highest buildings nearby to get a better look at the battlefield. He saw it, just 3 streets away from his position a large group of the artificial enemies was heading his way. The robots almost seemed surprised when he landed in front of them just as they made a turn, but they attacked without hesitation. It was a massacre of oil and metal. Izuku pierced the hull of the closest 3-pointer, grabbed whatever it had inside its shell, and pulled out a handful of wires and other circuitry. The effect was immediate. The green monster keeled over, but before it could hit the ground, he picked the brute up by one of its legs and hurled it at a pair of 1-pointers standing nearby. They didn't have a chance to dodge in time, and all 3 metallic beasts were quickly enveloped in fire and smoke. Before his enemies could react, one of Izuku's arms transformed into a bone blade which he then used to cleave right through 5 other robots like a red-hot knife through butter. One of the bots tried to charge him, but the green-haired boy simply jumped, did a straddle vault over the monster's head, and stabbed the 3-pointer standing behind it. Other students seemed to also have little trouble dispatching these artificial villains, mostly due to the fact that although they seemed extremely threatening at the first glance, they were also very easy to destroy. This fact didn't go unnoticed by the UA staff, and so phase 2 of the test was initiated 5 minutes after the test began. Elsewhere, Shoto just impaled 4 2-pointers with ice spikes in one move when suddenly the ground began to shake violently before a loud crash could be heard. When he turned to look at the source of the sound, he was met with a colossal being. This thing had to be at least 50 meters tall, but probably bigger, and even Shoto felt a certain hesitation when face to face with such a giant. Yet the teen was able to steel his nerves. He saw the other candidates running away from this mechanic monstrosity. He was pretty sure he even saw Ida pass by. This thing's only purpose here is to slow us down. The boy was ready to do the same as the other students. After all, there was no point to fighting this Goliath, but then he noticed it. Maybe 10 meters from the giant robot, there was a girl laying on the ground, her legs trapped under some heavy-looking debris from one of the buildings, and the massive thing was moving towards her. No one else seemed to notice this, since everyone just ran past her without a second glance, and Todoroki knew that he needed to do something. Normally this wouldn't be a problem. He would simply turn such a beast into a glacier, but he couldn't do that because that amount of ice would hit the girl too. I need to get closer. And so, he took a running start, created an ice path for himself which led to a ramp, and sent himself flying right at the giant. The massive beast tried to swat the scarred boy like a fly, but it was way too slow, which allowed Shoto to safely land on its shoulder, and once there he slapped his right hand to the giant's head and watched as the ice quickly spread out and encompassed the robot. With the robot immobilized, he was able to create an ice slide down and got on to check whether that girl was okay. But the moment he got onto it, the metal body shifted ever so slightly, the ice under him cracked, and before he could do anything, he was falling down with the entire ice structure. Elsewhere, Izuku was facing a similar opponent. Just after he dealt with the last robot from the group, he encountered the Leviathan, which appeared out of nowhere and seemed dead set on squishing him. The boy, however, simply took a deep breath, gathered the power from One for All, and with a fierce war cry, delivered a devastating flying uppercut to his opponent. The blow was so strong that it not only destroyed his automatic adversary, but it also tore the robot's head clean off from its body and sent it soaring. The observing judges and teachers watched in awe as the head quickly spun in the air before landing with an earth-shattering crash outside the city replica. Well, most of them, one very tall blonde one was probably beaming proudly when it happened. This was probably the first time he tested the full extent of his quirk, and it was exciting on so many levels to see that those 9 years of increasingly difficult training were worth the effort. However, the teenager didn't have much time to celebrate his victory since the test wasn't over yet. He had only about 40 points under his belt, and so he began searching for more targets. On the streets he encountered a few stranglers here and there, and it wasn't enough, but then he struck gold. There was this weird sound somewhere in the distance ever since the battle started. These noises came irregularly, and they were always accompanied by a small change in air pressure. Almost like an impossibly loud drum being hit over and over again, but as Izuku got closer to the source of the distracting noise, he realized what it truly was. The constant and never-ending chain of explosions which were being produced by one of the candidates who was completely surrounded by robots from every direction and blasting them to kingdom come. You rust brains want more. Then come and get more. The blonde teen with incredibly spiky hair shouted while sending detonation after detonation around himself. Elsewhere, Shoto was heading down towards the sidewalk at a very uncomfortable pace. Funnily enough, he had this weird mental image of his father attending his funeral and crying because he would need to find another woman with an ice quirk since there was no way Shoto's mom would let him even remotely near herself. He would normally use his ice to redirect the force from his fall, but there was no surface on which he could generate it and his own fire lacked the same propulsion as his father's. So, there was basically only one way to survive something like this. The boy extended his legs as much as possible, aimed his feet at the fast approaching ground, and readied himself to relax his joints at the right moment to disperse as much of the impact as possible. He was prepared for the pain, possible spine injury, wheelchair, and disappointment from his father. All these thoughts crossed his mind as the ground got ever so closer. But instead, he was hit by something completely unexpected. A slap on the cheek. His descent slowed to a crawl. He lost contact with gravity until it suddenly returned when he was about a meter above the ground. Shoto landed on his chest and belly, which knocked the breath out of his lungs, but he was otherwise unhurt. The boy was able to get up after a couple of seconds, soon enough to see that girl he just attempted to save on a broken piece of a robot, vomiting. Still a bit shaken from the experience, Todoroki walked closer to check up on her. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked calmly when she finally stopped trying to cough up her stomach. "Yeah, just a little motion sickness from all that flying," she said when her breathing returned to normal. Only 2 minutes left. The two of them quickly shared a look of shock before each hurried in a different direction, trying to get as many last-minute points as possible. Meanwhile elsewhere, his assumption was correct, there were more than enough robots for the two of them. Izuku grabbed a lamppost, tore it out of the ground before using it like an oversized golf club. Broken metal bodies were sent flying in every direction. "Hey, watch where you're aiming, idiot," the blonde teen shouted as a piece of steel missed his head by a few inches. "Sorry," Izuku answered before he picked up a robot and slammed it down on its beeping friend like it was nothing. Extra," Bakugo thought as he grabbed two of the fake villains and blasted them into oblivion. He already had at least 60 points when this green-haired idiot showed up and started stealing his kills. To say that he was mad would be an understatement, but he couldn't do anything about it. Revenge would have to wait since he didn't want to end up getting expelled for attacking another student, but something about this extra also seemed incredibly familiar, he just couldn't put his finger on it. His train of thoughts was however soon derailed as he heard a metallic clang behind him. Anger gripped his heart when he realized what that sound was. Oh shit, not now. But it was already too late. The teen fell on his side as he lost his balance. His hands quickly clutched his leg and his fingers swiftly focused on making the limb work properly again. "You piece of crap. I oiled you this morning." Izuku saw him lying there on the ground and quickly forced his way past a three-pointer to see what just happened. And what he saw shocked him. The blonde-haired teen had his pant leg rolled up, but his left ankle and foot were gone, replaced by a complex mechanical prosthetic. "Hey, stop staring, you scum, or I'll kill you." The blonde teen yelled furiously as he snapped the prosthetic back into place, which brought the taller boy out of his shock, soon enough to notice that at least 6 of those heavy hulking hazards were headed their way. Izuku protectively stepped in front of Bakugo as he was getting up from the ground and smashed the first robot's head off before kicking the second one through a nearby brick wall. He soon understood his mistake, however, there were not 6 of them, but 7, and the 7th artificial adversary managed to get into his blind spot. Before he could react, there was a huge hard green arm on a collision course with his face. "This is gonna hurt tomorrow," he thought and mentally prepared himself for the painful sensation which awaited him. But it never came, instead there was a blinding light and a loud sound as another gigantic explosion sent all the robots straight to hell. Izuku then noticed the other teen back on his feet with his twitching arm outstretched and smoking. "Time's up." President Mike yelled and the sirens in the town turned on, giving everyone a signal that the exam was officially over. "Thank you," Izuku tried to say, but the shorter teen grabbed his jumpsuit and pulled him closer. "You didn't see anything. Got that?" Kitsuki said angrily as his other hand created a few ominous sparks. And then it clicked. That angry look. That wild spiky hair. Those miniature explosions. "Is that really you, Kaken?" Izuku asked with wide eyes. As he heard his childhood nickname, Kitsuki's face also adopted the look of recognition. Deku? The end. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, link is in the description. See you next time, till then sayonara.